All right. I'm going to start the meeting and call us to order. Nice to see everyone. I wanted to first welcome Sam Lucier to the board, and perhaps we could take a moment to go around and introduce ourselves. And maybe start at the end there, Terry Sue.
Terry Sue, principal at Sheldon.
Sandy Alexander, principal at Montgomery.
Gavin Roddy, principal of Berkshire.
Sam, I'm a nurse at NMC.
Miranda on the Sheldon board.
Audrey, Bakersfield board.
Mary Niles, live in Montgomery. I'm chair of the NMV board and the FNESU board as well.
Morgan Daybell, CFO.
Courtney Fletcher, communications coordinator.
Kevin Briggs, principal here at Bakersfield.
Derek Lewis, I'm the school counselor here.
Michelle.
Oh. Hi, Michelle. I'm Montgomery. Hi, Sam.
Hi.
And Superintendent Lynn Coda, who I think you know, she'll be joining us shortly as well. So welcome. We're glad to have you here.
Thank you.
And I'll maybe remind everyone as with abbreviations and acronyms as we kind of get Sam kind of roll in here, just might be helpful for some of the terminology to just clarify as we go along. All right, so welcome, nice to see everyone. On our consent agenda today, we have our prior minutes from November 3rd. We have a number of policies, first and second read, as well as a couple of, one informational only, and then to be removed, that class size policy. Without Lynn here, I had a question, but I don't, about why this is being removed.
I can help with that.
Okay, that would be great.
So the AOE has now a statute about class size, and it's in law now. So
Okay.
rather us having to keep updating this when the AOE does, we're just taking the AOEs. And
Right.
so we don't need one of our own if the AOE has their own policy.
Yeah, because it supersedes our
Yeah,
own policy. Yeah, okay.
So that's why we're just voted to remove it.
Okay, great, thank you, that's really helpful. Any other questions or discussion about the prior minutes, any of the policies? All right, so then I'll make a motion then to accept the consent agenda, and we'll do that by roll. Michelle?
Aye.
Audrey?
Aye.
Miranda?
Aye.
Sam?
Aye.
And Mary is an aye. I think that given that Lynn isn't here yet and is running late on account of other business, we'll just kind of see when she rolls in and whether we push hers to her report to the end. We'll just kind of see what her timing ends up being. And we have our public comment. Jared, welcome. Are you here to address the board?
Yes, please.
Okay, absolutely. And one second, Courtney, no one else that everything I see on the screen is, okay. All right, great. Nice to see you, Jared, please.
Good evening. Jared Ballenberg from Berkshire. I want to thank you for acknowledging at the November board meeting that a pride presentation was held at Berkshire Elementary School during an assembly. In the interest of transparency, when the Gender Sexualities Alliance, or GSA Club, was introduced at Berkshire Elementary, a teacher went to multiple classrooms of children to provide them information about it and to gauge their interest in it. It was reported that the teacher told the children that they would take it slowly and that even the parents haven't been notified because it's a very sensitive topic. So I'll say that again. Even the parents haven't been notified because it's a very sensitive topic. As a parent, this was very upsetting. So we reached out to the principal on 4 separate occasions, twice to the superintendent and once to our school board representative, before the principal finally responded. To date, these statements have never been refuted. Regarding parental notification, the principal explained that the school does not directly communicate with parents every time that we start a club. The principal spoke with teachers who were present when the GSA Club was introduced, and he explained that GSA clubs provide a safe and supportive environment for for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and all LGBTQ+ children, teenagers, youth, as well as their cisgender heterosexual allies. The principal stated, as this is an exploratory phase, the teacher wanted to assure students that the planning will be slow and deliberate to build a sense of comfort for the students in this club and to create a thoughtful plan for this club. The principal said that we are having these conversations with our students as NMVUUSD is committed to ensuring educational equity for all students in our schools. While the goal of this club in providing a safe and supportive environment for students is commendable, by definition, it separates children based on their sexual preferences. I do not understand how a club that is based on a child's sexuality is supposed to assist in ensuring educational equity. It also implies that a safe and supportive environment is not being provided outside of this club. The GSA Club at Berkshire Elementary was obviously school-initiated, promoted, and directed. It began as a school-sponsored activity and remains as such, and it can be interpreted as a promotion and normalization of school-endorsed viewpoints. The superintendent later restated, based on the principal's summary, I feel the situation related to the introduction of the GSA Club at Berkshire has been handled appropriately. The current principal also supported the school's prior position. However, these actions not only undermine parental authority, they also potentially put impressionable, vulnerable children at risk of harm. Children do not have the emotional nor intellectual maturity to understand what they are being exposed to, and they are likely to accept without question any message conveyed to them by their teacher. For example, it's been reported that on at least one occasion, children in a kindergarten class have gathered in a circle to have discussions about their sexuality. In another example, a 5-year-old child came home one day all excited and told his parents that he wanted to be gay. The parents asked him if he knew what it meant to be gay and why he wanted to be gay. The 5-year-old did not know what it meant, but said that he wanted to be gay because his teacher told him that gay people have superpowers. Now I understand there are some community members who are concerned that there are people who want to reshape the entire curriculum for everyone's children based on their worldview. This is a great example of projection, because that is exactly what has been done over the past few years with the promotion of gender ideology, CRT, and DEI under the guise of tolerance and inclusion. Parents do not want to send their children to taxpayer-funded public schools where they participate in conversations, activities, or groups focused on their sexuality. That is not why the community funds our schools. Thank you.
All right. I see, Jay, that you are, have arrived. Did you join, are you joining us for public comment or just to watch the meeting? Okay, welcome. Nice to see you. Okay, so then we'll move on to our school spotlight. Kevin?
All right, Sam, hold on. Here we go with our 504s, ESTs, PLCs. But you'll get it all.
I'll try to keep up.
You'll have it all figured out. It's no big deal. So first of all, Kevin Briggs, principal here, second year here again. It's been a blast. Today I brought Derek Lewis, who is our guidance counselor. Last year he played a dual role with Berkshire. He was a family engagement coordinator in both our schools, and I said, no, you're going to stay right here. And now we have him as a guidance counselor, and I can't be any more excited to have him here and to help me out today and answering some questions and also share a little bit about what he's doing. So what I want to talk a little bit today, it'll be a little. Last year I got a little carried away. This year I'll do a little. Is behavior academies. So this is my 34th year in education, and I can honestly say we have forever we haven't really done enough when it comes to behaviors. We've done a lot of like, come on now, let's not do that, or hey, great job. But we haven't quite filled those lagging skills, right? We haven't quite identified what they are and what we can replace those behaviors with. So over the course of time, 34 years, I finally found something 2 years ago through Solution Tree, which is also the same people that are the kind of the gurus around professional learning communities, or PLCs, as you'll hear about those. And so I trust in what they do. So on here is the book that we're using, which is Behavior Academies, and it kind of guides us in what we want to do. So, Court, I'll just ask you to flick it. So, and I apologize for reading PowerPoints, because I go to conferences and I can't stand being read to, but I'm going to do what I say I don't like to do. So even as adults, we're constantly learning and practicing life skills. For example, you've had to learn how to identify and respond appropriately. You've had to learn how to problem solve. You've had to learn how to organize yourself. You even had to navigate through those jealous feelings back in college, or those emotions. Hit it, Court. Okay, so kids are the exact same way, and they're still developing. And they need support and they need practice. Like I always say here, every good kid finds mud puddles. It's our job to support them through those mud puddles and to teach them constantly. So what is a Behavior Academy? A Behavior Academy builds on that inner toolkit to replace behaviors and to draw from whether we are in the present and providing opportunities to apply their learning in a safe space. We want to make sure there's no better place to screw up than here. You are surrounded by nurturing adults. You're surrounded by people who want the best for you. And so when you have that opportunity where things don't go quite right, it's not about getting them or that gotcha moment, it's about teaching. And so that's what this is about, Court. So the teachers were asked to identify, they went through all their students in their class. And you have a paper in front of you that kind of guidelines what that looks like. So what are the challenging academic and social behaviors that you're seeing from your students? So we went through, we made sure that we identified what is really having the hiccup for these kids academically, what's the hiccup for them on their social as well. What target life skill do you think your students may be struggling with? If you look at that next page, Court, you'll see that it's easier to think about it in terms of a challenge than it is to think about it in terms of what that life skill is. So they're being disruptive. What does that really mean? They're having a hard time at controlling their impulses. The teacher might say, well, they're constantly shutting down. That's easy to identify. Well, they're having a hard time identifying what those emotions are. Oh, they're just giving up easily. They're not really trying. We got to teach them that life skill of self-efficacy. So when we're talking about this, it's about reframing our thinking and our conversations so that it's less about the challenge and more about what is the lagging skill that these kids have. So, I think that's one. So, what is Behavior Academy? It's a system. It's a way of providing additional time, ongoing teaching, or reteaching to support. There's rehearsal where they actually have scenarios that are targeting those life skills that we just mentioned and can be generalized and developed into productive habits. Targeted life skills is the first step to matching the students to appropriate behavior academies. Each behavior academy has 8 targeted life skills and 2 replacements. So on your paper in front of you, the teachers went through and they were like, well, we strongly agree all the way down to strongly disagree that Courtney is, I'm going to serve as an example, Courtney is struggling with civil discourse with peers, and they would go through, do we strongly agree, do we strongly disagree, all the way down through. And they would mark that. At the end, you store it up and you add it. And on the back side, you can see that when you score it out, it gives you a summary score. And if a student is scored in a 6 or above, that's something that might be helpful to have a behavior academy. Here, you want this? Kind of paper doing? All right. And so we did that. What I liked about that was it identified exactly what it is that we needed to target. So instead of wasting our time on a hands-off academy, because a kid scored a 1, we went to the kid that had the 7, 8, or 9 under emotional regulation. And we made sure that we target that. And then Derek steps in and does and works some magic. So the next page, which is on page 155.
Is this for all grades?
All grades.
Yeah.
Kindergarten through
Kindergarten
8th?
through 8th grade.
Okay.
Yep. And on the next few pages actually has one of the 8 different academies. So you kind of get an idea of what those are. So, for example, in the hands-off academy is designed to help students struggle to keep their hands to themselves when they're angry or perceive a situation is unfair. aka recess, might be a spot where you see that, right? So they have a hard time keeping their hands to themselves. It might be just being in line to go from down the hall. Sometimes they get a little touchy to get down there.
Can kids be in more than one academy?
Not at the same time. We, like, the way we did it here at the school is we prioritized, like, we looked at the Behavior Academy matching sheet. We looked at this, they scored a 6 or a 9 or whatever in these categories. And then I talked to the teacher and I said, what area do we want to focus on first? Because I didn't want it to be they were in my office all the time, right? So we did it so that way it was, emotional regulation is really the skill that we have to focus on first, and if we're going to address any of the other skills, and that's the skill that they really have the most need in. So we're going to go through that, we're going to get through that academy, and then we're going to move on to that next academy.
Good.
So in the Hands-Off Academy, there are 8 different targeted life skills. There are 8 weeks that Derek would be seeing a child. And each week has its own piece to it. Within this book, it actually has the activities that go along with it. Again, like 34 years, I haven't seen something like this. Now, is it a magic bullet? I don't know, but at least it's something. And I can tell you, the 33 other years, there hasn't been anything, so I'm excited about actually trying something. So, you can see them. So for the Hands-Off Academy, these are the 8 life skills that we're having a hard time with. Self-reflection, impulse control, identifying those emotional triggers, self-regulation, conflict resolution, accountability, help-seeking, and communication, both verbal and nonverbal. Those are the 8 things that they're doing, okay? So what did we do? We met, when I say we, I was a part of these conversations. Guidance, myself, the teachers, and we met and we talked about all the kids. Okay, that was step number 1. Step number 2 was that after we did that, we pulled all those kids in 7th grade, 6th grade, whatever it was, and we looked at what students like say in K1-2, what students in 3, 4, 5, what students in 6, 7, 8, we might be able to do things together, and what are times that we realize they might need more 1-to-1 or 1-to-2, depending. Okay, so you can't take all of your, say you have 7 kids in your K1-2 that are having a hard time emotional regulation and put them all in the same room to get the same bang for your buck. So Derek, as well as the teachers, decided, you know what, this makes more sense to do it like this, and this makes more sense to do it at this time. So really it was a total teacher input on how we're going to make this work. And then Derek jumps in and does some behavior academies. Now, if you want to just talk about maybe one example of one.
Like what the session looked like?
Yeah.
So today I had an emotional regulation session with some of my kids. I had a group of 3 kids. The skills today, one of them, so as Kevin talked about, every week there's like one skill that we're focusing on. And then within that, I give them 2 strategies. And so at the end of the 8 weeks, they're going to have 16 different tools for their toolbox that they can use. Obviously not all 16 of those tools are going to work for every kid, right? But if you can take away 5 skills that we talked about over the course of these 16 like different tools, I'm gonna be thrilled that those are 5 skills that you didn't have before. So today, one of the skills we talked about was in the moment when you're having a hard time, being able to recognize that. The second part of that was, okay, you recognize you're having a hard time, then what? What's a skill that you can use? What are 5 things that you can see right now? Calling them out. What are 4 things that you can feel right now? What are 3 things that you can hear? What are 2 things that you can smell? And they're like, well, this is a hard one. Like, we're just sitting in the room. And it's like, right, so that could be you're realizing you're having a hard time. You go wash your hands, and that hand soap is going to be a smell. That could be you use hand sanitizer, and that hand sanitizer is going to be a smell. That could be you're at home and you're having a hard time, and you smell a candle. It doesn't have to be burning, but you're smelling that candle. And then what's something that you can taste? They're like, well, what does spit taste like? And it's like, well, I guess, yeah, you're tasting spit. But it's, can you chew gum? Can you eat a pretzel? Can you eat a cracker, a cucumber? Just like sensory, changing your outlook of you're not thinking about your anxiety, right? Because if I'm thinking about what this flavor in my mouth is, I'm probably not thinking about why I'm so anxious. So that's one of the skills we talked about today. Then I like to end some of my sessions fun, right? Because they can be kind of heavy. And this group of boys wanted to play Uno, so we played Uno. And one of the boys was really upset that he got out because we were playing Uno No Mercy. He got 25 cards, so he was out. He was really upset about that. And I said, all right, here we go, practice in real time. Let's think about those 5 things that you can see right now.
Here's a pretzel.
And it was great, it was wonderful. Really, these behavior academies, I'm the most confident running the emotional regulations one. I think that makes the most sense. Hands-off academy is great. There are a couple where I'm like, this is skill set that I have to build up before I meet with the students, right? Of like, there's 16 skills and I don't exactly know what some of these skills are, so I have to learn for myself first, so that's been really cool.
We've also, I don't know if I put it in here. No, I don't think so. But well, I'll talk about this. You're fine, Corey, it's fine. I can see you want us to move on. So, so this is our path. So when we got the lagging skills, comparative skills, and behavior academies. Now we're talking, and it's the ongoing is what are those replacement things, those opportunities to teach, like what Derek is talking about, and then also there's some reflecting growth throughout those behavior academies. One of the pieces that we have put in place is to also share with the staff of those students, what are they doing in there, so that it's not isolated into just behavior academies. But also, you know, for example, this one that he's talking about, the staff will find out about those 5 things, and they'll be able to kind of guide a child through those times. So it's really helpful. And then we always want to celebrate. When we also the kid who's in this for hands-off academy keeps their hands off, we got to celebrate, and really that's important as well. And then we'll start over. These are 8-week cycles. Aubrey, you're absolutely right. There are kids that might need more than one, and there's also kids that might need to do it more than once, right? And so not only do we have the Behavior Academy, which has activities, but we also have Wayfinder, which the district has we can build within this as well. So one of the places that we've seen it already is in a particular grade cluster or grade, there were some high needs for emotional regulation. Homerooms are a great spot to do some Wayfinder activities around emotional regulation, so that all kids are getting it. But then within that, we target a handful to work specifically with Derek around that. Is that it?
Yes.
Yeah. So, on the back page, whatever page, on 59, that's kind of the 8 different, you can see what the Hands-Off Academy looks like. So the 3 R's, rewind, replay, redo, voice memo to self, that's in there. All the way, those are all the activities that take place with it. So you kind of have a feel of what's going on. That's Behavior Academies at Bakersfield School. Any questions from anyone? For your specifically.
And this is the first year or the second year that you all been in first year?
This is the first year, and you know, I'm excited. I'm excited to either it works or it doesn't, honestly. But what I'm excited about is that we're doing something. And for years, we've just kind of didn't really, it wasn't targeted as well as this is. And so I'm excited about that. I don't think it's going to fail. I actually think it's going to do really well. I think that we're actually putting an emphasis onto it with some targeted, and I mean that alone is going to help it out.
Have you noticed any more insightfulness from any of the students, that they're more aware of their emotions?
I mean, I think, like, I was having a conversation with one of our interventionists the other day, and she said it was really sweet because the other day, you know, I noticed one of my kids, like, he went to raise his hand and then he put it down and then he went to interrupt, and then he realized, like, no, like, I need to count to those 3 seconds. And he verbalized to his teacher, like, this is a skill I learned. So I do think that our teachers are seeing it, and I think our teachers, because we're trying to not have it so siloed, right? Like you go to this lesson with Mr. Lewis and then that's kind of like where it dies. Like teachers are hearing about it and they're trying to encourage those skills. And then part of it is like, how do we increase that? And so the other day I was having a conversation with the same teacher and it's like, how can we use it so that way these kids, like, right, 16 skills is a lot. And so is it like that we create like flashcardy type things of like, this is literally your toolbox, or what other skills do we want to do? And we're in week 4, right? So we're about halfway through the academy. I don't think we'll know that by the end of, by the end of week 8, we'll have a okay, let's try what worked and what didn't work and debrief that. But I think, yeah, there's conversations around the school, there's conversations amongst friend groups of yo, what'd you do with Mr. Lewis today? And they have those conversations about what they talked about.
And do you think you'll kind of work with teachers over the course of the year and the upcoming years, the more that this kind of is integrated into the school to kind of see, I can only imagine there'll eventually be direct kind of correlation between improvement in kind of learning and how someone feels in the classroom and academic space when they have a bit more kind of mastery over some of these kind of complex emotional skills that everyone has to learn, and some learn more easily than others. And we're all lifelong learners with some of these things, but I suspect there'll be a way to kind of gauge and work with the teachers to see that there is a through line between that kind of social emotional piece and how successful they are as kind of learners, and also just how they feel about themselves kind of in their peer group as well.
I would imagine if you start in kindergarten, by the time if you did this over years, by the time the kids got older, theoretically you'd see less behaviors in the higher grades, right? So as you're starting young, as they're going through the grade levels, you would notice a decreased need at the higher levels, hopefully.
I've always subscribed to the students do all they could, right? And so that's a Ross Green concept, Dr. Green, and he talks about kids having lagging skills, and they just need to be taught those lagging skills. Mm-hmm. And I agree with you. So the sooner we teach them, and it's not even, it's a lot of the things we're teaching are things that are being taught at home, right? But when they come here and something might happen, there's no better group of people to support them through that. Yeah. Here at the school, right? And so I can see where that would be really helpful. Any other questions from anyone? You guys, the gallery, have any questions? No, you're all set? All right.
Thank you.
Derek, if you want to stay, you're more than welcome.
Oh, come on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right, Derek.
Appreciate
Well, see you tomorrow.
Bye, Derek. Great. What's that?
Julie Cattell just came on.
Who did? I'm sorry.
Julie Cattell, I don't know if she.
Oh, okay. And is Callie here to do the presentation, the other presentation?
No, but I have a recording from Callie.
Okay.
So Callie did this presentation for the FNESU board in November, and Lynn thought that it would be very helpful and insightful for the NMV board to see it as well. And she can't be here because she has a grad class tonight, so she recorded the presentation instead.
It dovetails very nicely with
Yes.
Kevin's
Yeah, for sure.
presentation.
Let me give it 2 minutes.
Hi, district boards. My name is Callie Goss. I'm our district's social emotional learning coordinator, and I'm here with a spotlight that gives you a window into how we monitor social and emotional growth in Franklin Northeast. So thanks for giving me this opportunity. I'm sorry I can't be there in person. If you're watching this, I am in a grad class at the moment. So to start, let's go back to our board goal that we made about 3.5 years ago. That is kind of our guiding light for the work of teaching children social and emotional skills. So we're aiming for, by June of 2027, each student in Franklin Northeast demonstrating growth in the core skills of self-awareness, agency and adaptability, empathy, collaboration, and purpose over an academic year. Now, you'll notice some of these phrases are in parentheses. That's just the synonyms or the specific phrases we're using in our district because of the curriculum resource we use to teach these skills called Wayfinder. So I'll explain what they mean exactly in a second. So when you think about core skills, or even the acronym of SEL, which is kind of a loaded and even controversial term, it helps to break down the skills we're actually talking about into specific behaviors that are really not at all controversial and are pretty common and agreed upon in terms of what we want for our children and ourselves and our relationships and our work and our families. So when you are talking about self-awareness, you're really talking about being able to name strengths in yourself and others, or recognizing when you're being influenced by other people. If you are adaptable, you're skilled at not letting other people's emotions impact you, or changing the way you do things when an approach doesn't work. If you show empathy, you can notice when others aren't happy and you take time to understand their point of view. When you use collaboration skills, you can work with others to resolve conflict. You're good at not only giving feedback, but being able to receive it and then change your behavior as a result. When you show agency, or when you have a sense of agency, you can stand up for yourself without putting other people down. When you have a sense of purpose, that means you can name your passions, you act in a way that matches what's important to you or what you value, and then you also can, or you also tend to express gratitude. So these are all specific behaviors that really are what we're talking about when we're talking about fostering social and emotional skills in students. So let's think about what these might look like in a classroom. And this is a very common, some version of this scenario happens very frequently in not only our classrooms, but in classrooms across the state, across the nation, across the world. So anyone who works with children has seen some version of this. So as you're listening, this is a mini vignette about a kid named Jamie. And Jamie's skill deficit in one of these areas is contributing to this situation. Usually I don't read slides, but because I'm not there, I will read this to you. If you want to pause it and fast forward and read to yourself, that's fine too. So during Ms. Chen's 4th grade science class, Jamie's group is making a solar system poster, but Jamie immediately takes control, grabbing the poster board, interrupting teammates, and insisting on making Mars the center instead of the sun. When Amir tries to share Jupiter facts and Ben suggests planning together, Jamie dismisses their ideas and takes Keisha's marker without asking, saying, "You guys just don't see the vision yet." Ms. Chen notices the frustrated group members and gently reminds Jamie that everyone needs to contribute their research planets. Jamie's frustration explodes. Their ideas don't make sense. And after Ms. Chen insists everyone's work must be included, Jamie shoves the markers across this table, some clattering to the floor, and shouts, "Fine, it's going to look terrible, but that's not my fault," before slumping in the chair with crossed arms, turned away from the group and refusing to make eye contact. So in your head, ask yourself, which core skill deficit is leading Jamie to interact the way she does? Answer that question in your head. Okay, now let's think about how we might measure our progress with fostering these skills. So first, it's helpful to realize that teaching social skills is very different than teaching reading or math. And I'll give you an example. So if you think about a skill that's related to agency, so I can stand up for myself without putting other people down. Some people call that being assertive. Really, when you know how to decode a word, for example, in reading, like I know how to read the word measuring, I will always be able to read the word measuring. I can spell it, I can write it, you can show me any text and I can read the word measuring. That is not the case with being assertive. Some students and some adults even, they understand what it means to be assertive, but they have trouble applying it to certain contexts. And not only that, but even if I am good at being assertive, it's not always appropriate to be assertive in certain contexts. Like you can imagine in certain relationships even, it's okay to be assertive. In other scenarios, the appropriate or the more pro-social thing to do is to not actually be assertive and to let other people take the lead. You have to have kind of a depth of understanding when you are dealing with these social skills. So in order to measure our growth, we have to think about, are we teaching what we say we're teaching? Are our school climates conducive to fostering these skills? If you're thinking about being assertive, you can probably imagine environments that have fostered your own sense of assertiveness and made you feel comfortable being assertive. And there are also environments where it doesn't feel safe to do that. So we have to kind of keep a gauge on that. And then finally, measuring students' social emotional skills. So to what extent do individual students have these skills to be successful? Now, these are 3 different buckets of kind of measurement that you have to be gauging when you're trying to make progress with social emotional learning. Now, we currently have processes and systems for measuring all 3 of these. So we have metrics that tell us how much our curriculum resource is being used. We complete walkthroughs every year related to school climate and then priority areas we want to focus on related to that. And finally, today, I'm going to share with you some waypoints data that reflects our individual students' demonstration of these skills, or I should say perception of these skills. Now, how will we measure growth? This isn't like comparing one year to the second year to the third year, because our board goal is worded this way, that each student will demonstrate growth in the core skills over an academic year. Really, we should be focused on where students are starting in the fall and where they end up in the spring, and then asking what percentage of students demonstrated growth in each core skill. Now, if you think about here an example or what it sounds like, students in 3rd grade through 12th grade are self-reporting their perception of this social skill. So I stand up for myself without putting other people down. I'm rating myself on this. If I'm in kindergarten through 2nd grade, then my teacher is scoring me. So it's a combination of teacher reported and self-reported in terms of this final bucket that we're talking about today. So here's a summary of how our fall administration window went. I'll share this link to specific school data with Courtney, and she can link it in your notes if you want to take a closer look. But overall, our strengths, empathy, collaboration, and purpose. So purpose, again, is like knowing your values and acting in a way that matches that. And then our growth areas as a SU are self-awareness and adaptability. So this kind of overarching picture of our strengths and challenges is helpful and it's interesting to look at. But when you think about being more actionable, we really have to get down to the class level and student level. So teachers can view their students' results through pages like this. So there are certain cutoff areas for each core skill that sort students into percentile ranges. So the top 80% is called tier 1. So these are students who show kind of no concern, are in really the general population with how these skills are perceived. We have the kind of middle 15%, so the second tier, the 5th through the 20th percentile, and then the bottom 5th percentile and lower, which are kind of students who scored in the lowest bracket across each grade band in our district, and those would be areas of concern. So here's what a teacher would view. They could see their distribution of certain skills in their class. So as a class, you could see what your strengths are and then where some instruction might be necessary for these skills. You can also see how certain students scored, which might be helpful for planning one-to-one check-ins, planning individual groups. Now, related to those pages that teachers can view, our next step is using a protocol that allows teachers to not only learn about their classes, like their top skill and their growth skill, like I just shared with our district, but also understand which students scored in the bottom 5th percentile, and then planning an intervention or some type of action that will support this need. So they have kind of a menu of interventions they can choose from. Wayfinder makes it very easy to choose certain activities that support certain skills, or a more intensive intervention would be looking at the needs of your class and working with counselors and other behavior supports in your school to plan a targeted intervention. Now, what might this look like? I'll share that in a second. So this protocol was shared with principals right before Thanksgiving break. Several schools have already used it, and this is how we're interacting with Waypoints data, and then not only understanding it, but using it to take steps to support students' social and emotional needs. Now, it helps to think about what intervention looks like. So if you think about Jamie in our early scenario, more and more, because we're getting better at monitoring and taking action based on what we know, more and more teachers and leaders are seeing situations like Jamie's not only as a behavior issue, but also an opportunity to design like experiences and instruction to support Jamie in getting better at collaboration, which is her main need. Now, by intervention, I mean not an interaction that tells Jamie, you really need to include your group members, or like, Jamie, you need to go take a break, which might be completely reasonable because sometimes time away from a scenario is exactly what's needed to preserve the learning environment. But also, we can't expect Jamie to get any better at working with group members if we don't teach her the individual skills that support group work and that support collaboration. So when you think about what that might look like, think about collaboration in general. So I'll move myself over here. So collaboration as a skill, and because you're in the context you are, I'm going to ask you to think about a board meeting, like being good at collaboration with board members is comprised of a bunch of tinier skills. So when you're good at collaborating in board meetings, that means you can advocate for yourself or advocate for the group that you represent. You can regulate yourself when moments become tricky or controversial. You can also communicate well. Now, being good at collaboration means doing these specific things. So an intervention, if I have 2 or 3 or 4 students who need support with collaboration, I might design an intervention that supports these skills. And I'm going to teach you 2 of these kind of target or specific strategies you could teach students. Like, all right, today I'm going to show you some exit strategy language, Jamie, that you might use when you're feeling your body become overwhelmed by these feelings. When you use this word, like I take a minute, or I need a minute, or I'll be right back, I feel myself getting frustrated, you're using exit strategy language. And that's not a strategy just applicable to children, it's also applicable to adults too. When we're supporting Jamie's need in an intervention group, it also might look like teaching her idea building language. So when you have an idea, but there's already conversation about a different idea, how might you insert your own idea in a way that doesn't squash other people's ideas? That's what a sample intervention might look like. So that's kind of a window about some efforts that are happening at our schools. There are groups like this happening across many of our schools. And I think it's also important to note that when we're thinking about students like Jamie and their needs, this work is in direct service to their academic growth too. Because if you were in charge of supporting Jamie's growth, or if you were responsible for teaching her science priority standards, Jamie is not accessing those right now in this scenario. She really has to be taught skills like how to exit a situation when you're becoming frustrated, or how to use idea building language to build on other people's ideas in a way that communicates effectively. So that's what we're doing right now with supporting students' social and emotional skills. Thank you for watching, and thanks for the chance to give you a window into what's happening at our schools. Let me know if you have any questions. Have a great night.
Great. Thanks, Courtney. And thanks to Callie. You see her. Okay. So let's move on then to our financial update and budget discussion with Morgan.
Thank you. I will say up front for Sam's benefit that a lot of the slides in the budget presentation I'm going to go over pretty quickly tonight because we've seen them 2 or 3 times, but feel free to reach out at any time and I'll be happy to kind of walk you through them in more depth. In terms of updates, before we jump into the budget, we are still waiting on those 2 tuition bills from NMVU and Maple Run. We are still waiting for a first draft of your audit. I did get a first draft of the SU audit, and as expected, it is clean and in good shape, and we're just making a few corrections to it, and the SU board will be seeing that soon. When you show that, can I highlight things with a cursor? What's going on? Or if not, I can go up and point to links. Okay, so cue the sad trombone noise. We are now gonna get a little bit of bad news. FY27 budget, you can go to the next slide. As we've gone over in the past, we look at student enrollment, go to the schedule. We are here at December 3rd. We do have all the information from the December 1 letter, which I will be weaving into the discussion as we go on. Again, the hope is that we're able to finalize the budget at your January 7th meeting. We may push that off depending on where we are with Enosburg Richford setting a tuition rate and probably Maple Run setting a tuition rate. That's where you send most of your high school kids, and if that moves dramatically, it'll have a pretty big impact on your budget. So at this point in the draft you have now, the tuition rates for those 2 schools are really just guesses. Board goals we've covered a number of times. In terms of budget considerations, the only tangible update to this since your last meeting is that we have dental insurance increase has been proposed by VHI to be at 12%. It's a big percentage number, but dental is such a small part of the benefits package that you have that it only moves your budget by probably a few $1,000s over what we were predicting. So we'll include that, but it's not a big mover. We've got, again, you've got this in your slide deck that I sent earlier, staffing changes at the 4 schools. We have not touched the staffing plan since November, actually since October. So those changes are all the same, and we're seeing an overall decrease by about 6 people, budget to budget. Your FTE reports, you won't be able to see it on the screen, but it looks like this, and that just puts names and FTEs to all of the staff, and that is broken out by school and then by the function, so what they're doing, if it's direct instruction or special ed or administration. I'll do a pause right there. If there are any questions on the staffing plan, I am happy to try to answer them, or we can have your principals help answer them. Again, no changes since your last 2 meetings on that.
I think we're good. I'm good.
Okay. In your packets, you have budget detail. It's probably up to about 26 pages, and this is really the line-by-line work. It is there. It's great to have you guys look it over and see if there's anything that looks off to you. It just reminds you again that this budget, once you take out tuition, it is primarily your staffing plan, and so unless we've got some bad assumptions in terms of salaries or benefits, it's really going to be driven by the FTE decisions and the staffing decisions we've made already.
Morgan, can you just back up to page 5 of the big packet, and why are we not including any money in the budget for the PCB remediation?
That is a call that we can make. So right now, we have not put that in there. We do have some money in for each school for larger projects, which we could use for that.
Yeah.
But we're just calling that out. That is a big unknown. We've got work that will need to be done in Berkshire. We potentially have work that needs to be done in Sheldon. We're still kind of struggling to get an idea of the scope.
Right.
We'll continue to push DEC specifically for Berkshire and hope that we'll be able to deal with that window. But we will need to decide if we want to allocate money specifically for that, in addition to the larger buckets of project money that we have for those schools.
Okay. And we have no idea the scope or cost of the remediation because it's still in the fact-finding stage.
Right. And so what we would do is we're hoping we'll be allowed to replace that window, encapsulate with paint, and then we'll do another round of testing, and then we'll see where the numbers are at that point in terms of accessing the building.
And we have some money in the capital reserve fund that could be used.
And we will cover that. Yeah, we don't have any more that's specific to Berkshire, but we have money in that general capital reserve fund that can be used for any of the 4 campuses.
Okay. And so would you anticipate then, like we might be like this time next year, depending on where we're at with the governor's plan and all of that kind of level of complexity, that we might have more of an understanding of the scope and cost and be actually putting a line item in the budget for PCB remediation rather than taking a kind of stab in the dark and possibly overburdening taxpayers with a line item that we're not even sure we are is accurate.
So we may have more information by your January meeting in terms of scope. We are not going to have any more information in terms of legislative intent for funding these projects at schools for the next year. The other bit of information that we should have by your January meeting is a better idea of where your tuition expenses for this year are going to end up.
Yeah.
So if we do have the green light to do some movement, and we know that that we anticipate a savings this year in terms of tuition kids, Bert and I may be coming to you and saying we're gonna start doing some work in April to try to get ahead of that and use it out of this year's general fund.
Okay, okay.
So this is in your packet. This is now the full budget overview, and this is what will appear in your information that goes out to voters. And so I just mouse around. You can see up here the first half, top half in red, is the expense plan. So what we're planning on spending out of the general fund. Seen a few versions of this already. It has not changed all that much since the last time you saw it. A few things that are moving on it. I did add a little bit of money to tuition as we get more information on that from the schools that are sending you tuition bills. As I think I mentioned last month, we're also in open enrollment for health insurance. So I know that we've got people who are coming onto our health insurance plan now and this year. We're adding kids to a health insurance plan now this year. And so as those changes are happening, Jamie is letting me know, and I'm adding that to projections for next year. So if you go through with a fine-tooth comb, you're gonna see that some of the health insurance lines have been going up as those change. Had a few that have dropped, but for the most part, when we see changes like that, we're seeing people adding insurance because of the changes in Medicaid, or people adding a spouse or adding kids based on the average age of the employees that we have. The section in green under that is the revenue section. There's really not much that moves here from year to year. We'll get a state grant. I anticipate it's going to be $50,000 again to help support educating English language learners. And then the rest of that money is really some local income that we expect to get. Might be interest on the money that we keep in the bank. Some of it is going to be tuition payments for pre-K kids that are coming from out of your district but are in one of the 4 pre-K programs. So relatively small number, doesn't really move the needle much. The section in blue are the projected tax rates, and so kind of to walk you through line by line, hopefully for the second to last time before the state changes how we do this. Budget to budget, the overall spending plan is up about $750,000. We will be able to dig into really where those numbers are, but the big movers I'm confident are going to be health insurance and tuition payments. Local and grant revenue is up a little bit. Use of fund balance prior year, so this is the money that is left over at the end of the year, is going to drop. We came in closer to taking in the same amount that we spent last year, and so I'm anticipating around $18,000 from that up when the audit comes in, but of $18,000 of quote-unquote leftover money that we can use either to buy down the tax rate. This is the money that in the past we have used to ask the voters to put into a capital reserve fund as well. I think with the number being so small, we're comfortable saying we shouldn't bother asking to move that into capital reserve. It's not going to be a big enough impact, and we may as well use it all this year to try to help the tax rate. And so line 4 in this section, expenses that we anticipate minus the revenue we anticipate minus that money we have left over or cash in the bank is an education spending amount. And this is the high level number that everybody talks about. Governor talks about it in his December 1 letter, and it's really the figure that we use to compare our spending to other districts. This amount is divided by the long-term weighted ADM, or that weighted count of kids This number is moving a lot, and small changes in this number can have a big impact on the tax rate. So the numbers that we saw as of, I think, 3 days ago, were almost the same as last year. We picked up 3.5 kids, or 3.5 long-term weighted ADM. So a little bit of an increase there, which helps in terms of your per pupil spending and in terms of your tax rate. And so we take your education spending, that 24.9 million, we divide it by the number of kids, or that 2,064, and we get a per pupil ed spending amount. So this number with this budget and these assumptions is anticipated to be 12,063. And Courtney, if you'll speed down to probably the third to last slide briefly. No, yep, that one. So the 12,063 is the number that kind of drives our poll placement in this chart. And you'll see on this one, for the current year, we are at 1178. That blue line about 1/5 of the way up, the taller of the two blue lines, is where we are in relationship with the state. What we know is that everybody's number is going to go up for the most part until something changes. That first red line at the bottom is Missisquoi Valley. The red lines overall are the other towns in our other districts in our county. With this proposed budget, we are still under where they are the current year, and so we're going to have to talk about the increase. We're going to have to justify the increase to voters, but we're pretty confident that with this budget, we're still going to be in the basement of spending in terms of both the state and our county partners. So you can shoot back up to the page that nobody can read. So that 12,063 per pupil spending is going to be divided by what's called the dollar yield. That is a number that is was brought out in that December 1st letter. The number the tax department is using is $8,849, which is actually an increase from where it ended up last year. That increase helps your tax rate. And that number is not going to be set until May or June of next year. We will use this number when we talk about projected tax rates with your voters, unless the legislature tips that they're going to move it dramatically in January or February. I would be surprised if they're going to spend any time talking about that, given all the redistricting focus that those committees are going to have to take on in the first 2 months. And I will certainly defer to Lisa, who's online now, if she has better intel, but this number dropped 2 days ago, so I don't think we're gonna see anything other than this floated for a while. So if we divide the ed spending by the dollar yield, we get the district tax rate. So this is the tax rate that we start out with all 4 towns. Right now in this budget, it's completely flat, so the same tax rate as we ultimately passed with the voters last year. That tax rate's $1.3632. That tax rate is then divided by the CLA for each town. CLA is the common level of appraisal, and that for the second year in a row is kind of tweaked by the state based on where the statewide average is. So the statewide average is below market value by 70%, so the numbers are kind of adjusted to look at rather not where we are compared to just the town grand list, but compared also to the state. I know that's a confusing concept, but basically what we're trying to do with the CLA is change our tax rates so that we're paying based on fair market value in each of the towns. The CLA below 100% means that the fair market value for all the properties in our towns is below what's showing up on our assessed value or our tax bill. And this is where the good news, bad news comes in. Our CLAs in our 4 towns have dropped again this year. In 3 of our towns, dropped significantly more than what we see in towns across the state. And so that's good in a way. That means that we're seeing house sales going for much more than what houses are listed for. It's great for when we all want to sell our homes. It hurts now when we're paying tax on it. So you'll see, again, starting the district rate not changing at all. Bakersfield with this budget would see a 13-cent increase, about 9.1%. Berkshire, a little bit lower, 9.5 cents, 6.5% increase. Montgomery is the big mover with just under a quarter increase, or a 16.2% increase. Sheldon, the smallest increase, 8 cents or 5.7%. So again, the budget that we have in front of us today to discuss is bringing forward a flat tax rate increase, but those changes in CLA are gonna make those increases on what we see on our tax bill. Montgomery's being the most significant because they're seeing the biggest difference between what houses are selling for compared to what they're valued at.
Is there any, I don't know this, I should because I live there, any discussion on where they are in line with the reappraisal?
I don't know if they have anything scheduled. I have heard that Bakersfield has something scheduled. I don't know if they've started doing any of the work, and I have an email out to the town clerk.
I thought that was supposed to start in like June, like going door to door, yeah.
Okay.
And
Next
we
year.
got,
Everybody is backed up, so if it's starting in June, it's not gonna impact this budget. Hopefully it will be in time for next year's budget. I have not heard Berkshire, Montgomery, or Sheldon where they are. Berkshire and Montgomery are at the point where back in the day, the state would start putting pressure on them to reappraise. On the other side, Enosburg is in another, in a similar place to Montgomery, where they're very far off from their grant list. Sheldon, I think, is closer to fair market value, but I have not heard for any of those other 3 towns if there's an appraisal in the works. We can certainly do that for next meeting. I would bet that they are all gonna be behind Bakersfield though. So if you're saying Bakersfield is still a year out, it's unlikely this will change. On the plus side, you can, in a year when your towns are reappraising, you can pretty much put forward any budget and you're gonna look like a hero because those tax rates tend to drop when that CLA shoots up, 50 percentage points.
It's one of those things that it's difficult to comprehend how this all plays together, all the components, and what makes up the budget. And yes, that's true, the tax rate's going to plummet, but people are gonna be paying that tax rate on homes that are now assessed at what they're supposed to be in terms of market value. So it's just another complicating factor in this. But it's frustrating to come in with a flat district tax rate and see this kind of impact in each of our towns.
And I will tell you before we move from this slide, it's not on here, but to move the district rate a penny, which doesn't move the town rates, rates less because of the CLA, but to move that overall district rate a penny, we would either need the yield to go up by $65, which by the end of the session, this is an election year, that actually is conceivable. You can pick up 15 more kids, which I think we may pick up a few between now and January. We've already identified some that we think we should be getting weights for that we haven't yet. we could move your education spending amount by $182,000. So that's kind of the harder one to move. Good news on the tuition front might get you some of that, but it's really, other than that, it's changing staffing patterns to do that. The CLA numbers are not final. Looking at what they put out on December 1st last year compared to what the real numbers were coming in on December 31st, it moved maybe a percentage point. And it was different town by town, so I don't think you can really count on that to help universally.
And you said we only have 18,000 at play for buying down the,
And that's already,
oh, okay, so that's not consequential.
So
Yeah.
how are we gonna sell this to taxpayers? How do we do that?
right now. So, kind of getting back to the yield number, in the end of the legislative session last year, the legislature put in $119 million into the education fund, which helped increase the yield and buy down tax rates. It means that we're starting this year with a hole of $119 million, and that's part of the reason that the yield is maybe not higher than it is. We seem to be hearing that there will likely be another buy down this year. Nobody, I think, yet can predict how much money that would be or how much they want to impact the yield. But I would be surprised if the final yield isn't higher than what it is now. We will likely not have that data before your town meeting day vote, though.
I have a couple of thoughts I would like to share. So, every year when the December 1 letter comes out, it is often picked up by the media, which is what's happening here, and they're saying that, taxes are going to go up X percentage, whatever this is. And it is, I understand the reaction that our community has, and at the same time, we haven't finalized our budget, and other systems all around the state have not finalized their budgets. These are all based on projected numbers, and they're not talking about the whole. That 119 million is consequential in terms of, unless they buy down again this year, that $119 million is a driving force in that projected increase in spending. And I think it is easy to forget that in these times. So I understand that the tensions people are feeling when it comes to finances are hitting them from every possible angle, whether it's the gas pumps or the grocery store or wherever, and the tax bills are an added factor that are really stressing people out. At the same time, I'll just speak honestly as the educational leader in Franklin Northeast, one of the educational leaders in Franklin Northeast. It's heart-wrenching to have this happen and be in a position where we instantly go to the place where we always go here, which is, if nothing changes, what do we cut? And every time we do that in these systems, we take away opportunities from our kids. And our kids are starting from a disadvantaged starting point to begin with. So we're not in a good place with what this projection is. I think I have heard what Morgan has heard in the hopes that there would be another buy down this year. Do you remember what the anticipated increase was at this time last year? Was it 18? Is that what they were saying?
That's what they were saying.
So when the December 1 letter came out last year, the news all picked up, budgets are gonna go up by 18%. Where they landed was around 6, is what I remember. It was somewhere around 6%. So they took the 119 million and bought that down to just over 1%, about 1.5%, if I remember right. So where we start in December 1 is not where we typically land. So it is, if we can help people to understand all these factors at play, and it is, none of this is known with certainty because 1, we don't know what the legislature is going to do, and 2, we really don't know where budgets are going to come in throughout the state. And a reminder that the impact that we have on our budget is not only about what we spend on education, it's about what everyone else across the state spends on education because that impacts the dollar yield. So those are just some things that I felt like I needed to say today.
And I think related to that, so the budget that's in front of you, the education spending amount, so that's the money we need less the money we had, is up 3%. The December 1 letter uses a survey when they ask all the business managers, how much do you think your education spending is going to go up? The average that they are using is 8%, which means there are systems that are out there that when they were looking at this in October thought it was going to be 15%. And they're all seeing these numbers as well. And so there are systems that were planning on putting forward an increase 5 times what we are. And not everybody is seeing flat or slight growth in terms of their pupils as well, which impacts the tax rate. So I think there is going to be a lot of course correction in many communities. There are some communities that will vote whatever the board puts out there, regardless of the tax rate. But as we saw 2 years ago, there is a limit, even in those communities. And to your point on how we sell the budget, I think we do have to talk about the CLA and our relatively modest increase when we do that. I know that those are hard conversations to get to land with people. We do need to talk about tuition bills, and that's the structure that we have is that, a third of our kids just go away and we pay whatever schools want us to pay. And talk about health insurance as well, which unfortunately is a driver that's been in play for the last 5 years. And then we'll get into some talking points, certainly a little bit more later tonight, but as we sort of develop the message and develop the documents that you want going out to folks. And we will, of course, highlight that map that shows that we're the lowest spending in the county and 2 of the lowest spending in the state, and that it's likely, again, that we will lose ground.
Any plans for you to do school visits again to talk to our community about that?
Yep.
Yeah.
There are principals we've given a lot more time for principals to try to. Last year, the idea came a little late.
Yeah.
So sorry, principals, once again. They had to scurry last minute to come up with an event. So a little more time, a little more thought is going into the event. So we will be in every community talking about the budget. And I think this is half of it, right, is if you read what the headlines are without really deeply understanding the reality, there's a lot of misconceptions out there. So the more we can do, you as board members, us as leaders, friends, neighbors in our communities, have people come out so that they can really deeply understand what this means and what's it
firmly believe that helped. I mean, it's the same people at the select board meetings, it's the same people who go to these meetings, the same people who are at the town meetings are the people who are coming, they're the people who are doing a lot of the voting, and I feel like it's good, so.
We definitely will do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can go to the next one. This chart you've seen before splits out the budget by what we do. Hasn't really changed significantly from last month. We can go to the next one. We'll spend a little more time on what we buy. And so again, as we think about this budget, if we get into a place where we want to move it, half in red, that first half are all your people. So half the budget is just salaries and benefits. That big section in blue is mostly tuition payments. Spent about coming close to $8 million in this budget on tuition. And of that $750,000 increase, probably about 600 of that is tuition payments. And so again, we may get some good news on that front in the next 6 weeks, but that's really, as a district, the 2 places that you spend your money. This we covered in the past. It's just mostly for voters to talk about where the money comes from in terms of education spending, and then partnered with this next slide which breaks it up by what towns we're raising money in. And so this is for this current year. It won't change much for next year, but just to remind people that we, even though we are low spending, we are spending money that's raised in other towns on property tax in addition to the state money. Tax rate calculation, you would have seen this last year, and I touched on it a little bit as we looked at the overview page. But the way that we calculate a tax rate is the amount of money we need from the education fund, so what we're gonna spend less the money we have locally. It's divided by that pupil count. So spending divided by students gives you that ed spending per pupil. That's how we compare ourselves to other systems in the state. And then we divide that ed spending per pupil by the yield, which is that number that's ultimately set by the legislature to get to that district homestead tax rate. This slide kind of breaks down the different weights for the kids we get, and so I don't need to spend time on it here. It is in your packet, but basically we start with a 2-year average of actual kids who are here for a 30-day window each fall, and then we reduce it by a factor for pre-K kids who are not here for full days, and then we get extra weight for middle schoolers, high schoolers, kids living in poverty, English language learners, our towns that are sparse in terms of population, and our schools that are small. And so that's, we'll just kind of walk you through how we get from 1,100 kids, which is roughly who you're educating, to this figure of 2,000, because we know we don't have 2,000 actual kids in our district. We touched on this, go on to the common level of appraisal. This sort of walks through some examples of what the common level of appraisal is and how it's trying to equalize property values for taxpayers in different towns. And so essentially what it means is that right now a town appraised at $200,000 in Sheldon has a significantly different fair market value than a town appraised at $200,000 in Montgomery because of those CLAs. Tax rate history, this shows since unification where the tax rates have been going. And so you'll see here the last 2 years, that gray line is for Montgomery, kind of screaming up because of that change in CLA, where you'll see that the other 3 towns are kind of roughly where they were in FY22. Not much of a change, certainly not outpacing inflation for those towns. Next slide tries to put a little context to those numbers. So we've broken this up by each town, and you'll see, we'll just take Bakersfield as an example. The table on the right in orange shows what somebody is paying on an assessed property value of $100,000, $150,000 for the current year compared to next year. So again, this district rate is the same, so the number should be the same except for that change in the CLA. So what it's showing is that somebody's got a property value of $200,000 is going to see an increase in $261 on their tax bill year to year. Similar information on the left side. I may need to tweak this. We're still trying to track down some information from the tax department. But what this shows is the change for someone who is paying based on income. So it's held at $150,000 assessed home for all of those incomes, but it shows from $60,000 down to $100,000 what their increase would be if they're paying based on their income. And that income credit taps out at just over $115,000. It gives us significant number of families in all 4 towns, and certainly as we go into the meetings at the schools, we can talk about that more in depth.
Yeah, it might be helpful to kind of highlight that income sensitivity piece, so to remind people that it's gonna be proportional.
Yep.
The increase will be offset by the state payment for income sensitivity. And it's not just income, but it's also family size related, correct?
I believe so. Yep.
Okay.
We've got it for all 4 towns, and I will link in a calculator once the tax department is updated it, where folks can actually go in and put in what their specific income is, what their specific house value is, and figure out what their tax credit is worth. This slide we went over, this is the bond payments for all the districts. We don't usually get questions on this, but it's something that we include in the packets that are available to voters. The good news on this is that we've taken Montgomery off this list as we paid the last bond payment this year. Mary had asked about the capital reserve fund. So that district-wide fund at the beginning of the year had about $580,000 in it. We are likely pulling some of that down for the Berkshire boiler project, and we have used up the capital reserve fund that was specific to Berkshire. That was money that was left over when we did the building project 12-ish years ago, 14 years ago. And so I've been using that over the last decade for projects specific to Berkshire.
And Morgan, just to go back to that CLA piece, which I think, even after 15 years of doing budgets, it's one of the pieces that I find the most meddlesome to really wrap my head around. And I think it just might be helpful for us to figure out, especially for Montgomery, how to communicate this piece around the CLA. And one of the bigger drivers is that we're well over that 10-year threshold for a reappraisal that's driving this, because I think there's a misunderstanding that this, for some people, that these increases in taxes are related to merger, and they kind of harken back to Act 46 being the driver, and it's really like it's a misunderstanding about what's driving the tax rate increase. And certainly the CLA isn't the only driver. We have just renegotiated contracts to increase our salaries for staff. We see the proportion of our budget that goes to supporting our staff and our teachers. We have these forces of dental and health insurance over which we don't have control, that are also driving a lot of the budget. So it's not just one thing, but it might be, right. I wonder if there are some ways to help, especially when we're talking to the town of Montgomery, to help them understand this CLA piece that could be kind of perceived as kind of an inequitable component compared to the other 3 towns in the district, because right. Montgomery is in this somewhat unique place with the real estate market that I think is driven a little more by J-Peak and some of those factors, and the lapse in a reappraisal across. It's been well over a decade at this point.
Yeah, I would say 2 things on that is, like, there are those cost drivers, but don't miss the opportunity to say ed spending is only up 3%, and of that 2.5, 2 3/4 is due to tuition payments.
Right.
And we, as a district, really, before we had Sheldon, but we had the chance to change our district structure so that we would not be paying tuition. And voters felt like choice of tuition payments or choice of schools was more important, and this is the price of that.
Yeah.
In terms of the CLA, I think, I don't have the numbers for Montgomery right in front of me, but I can come up with them. But basically, if someone's looking at their tax bill and their assessed value is $150,000, the state thinks it's worth $300,000. Because we have a statewide system, they want to tax that property based on what the fair market value is. So they know that all or most of the properties in Montgomery are significantly below value. And so they are getting a higher tax rate. The state, when this was put into play 25 years ago, instead of tweaking those tax rates, could have actually gone in and said, you know what, we're gonna say, yeah, the town thinks your property's worth 150, but we think it's 300, so yeah, your tax rate's only that $1.36, and it didn't go up from last year, but you're seeing your property value go up. I think that would have been easier for voters to understand, because they'd just be looking at it and saying, okay, I'm gonna get this much if I sell my house for that. But it's not the decision that the state made 25 years ago when they passed,
Yeah.
like 60 or 68.
I have two questions for you. What percentage of this budget is personnel, approximately?
50.
Okay, so about 50% of the budget is personnel, year over year. Since merger, we have data that we received from a fall conference that we did together about health insurance spending since 2019. Do you remember the percentage increase in health insurance premiums since 2019? I'm testing you, sorry.
Yeah, no, I don't, but it was big.
It was like, I think it was 149% is what is in my head, and I can verify that for you. If I'm wrong, I will correct the record, but I hear that too. I hear that we should have saved money on the merger, and there's a blame of consolidation that budgets are going up, and I think we have to squash that, because the promise of saving money had to do with keeping our tuition dollars in our school systems, and we didn't do that. And no matter what budget you're talking about, whether it's a hospital budget or a personal budget, no one's spending the same amount that they were in 2019. Everything is more expensive. And for us in the people business, with 50% of our budgets going to employees, 149% increase on a healthcare benefit is enormous, and it has had a huge impact on this overall.
And we're also seeing, I think, graduating increasingly larger classes because our population is growing as well. So that high school tuition.
You've had a few big 8th grade classes in the last couple of years, and I think that that's going to taper off.
And you've had small junior, senior classes for the last 2 years that have had a pretty big impact here.
So it does seem to make sense to wait until we are firmer with those high school tuition numbers, right? To wait for Enosburg, for ER to finalize their budget, and then also Maple Run.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you send $4+ million to Enosburg and $1.5 maybe to Maple Run. So if they change, if their projection is off $500 from what I'm guessing right now, it has a significant impact.
Yeah.
May not be in the right direction, but
right.
We want to know it before we warn a budget.
Yeah.
You don't have a choice of what you pay.
And do we know the dates that they are warning their budgets?
We don't. We have to announce tuition rates, I think, by January 15th. Is the statutory deadline.
But would that leave us
certainly, I will have an idea of Enosburg Richford before then. And we work well with the other schools in our county, and I can talk to them when they get a little farther along their budget process. They're all going to be warning their budgets in early January, so it shouldn't. We shouldn't have any surprises after we finalize in January.
And as long as we do ours 30 days before town meeting day,
Yeah.
So we have a little bit of wiggle room. If we don't do warrant hours on the 7th, then we wait.
Yes.
Okay.
So the wonder I have, Morgan, is if, is it worthwhile for this board? I think ER is unlikely to warn a budget next week, would be my guess. I think they're gonna wait until January. Is there any inkling that you think we should try to move NMV after ER? Correct, it's the next week.
I think it would not be a bad idea to have a date on the books.
Okay.
Even if
A
we don't
tentative.
move it,
Okay.
just we could get together, and even most of us could come to that virtually and just do the final warning. And then we can still do a deep dive on the 3rd.
I have a random question. If school choice was not on the table, where would all of the students in our 4 towns go to high school? What would be that school?
Enosburg or Richford. And they could access universal high school choice, so they could apply to go to any other public high school in the state. And if there was room, they could go there. If you did not have school choice in this district, we could become a supervisory district instead of a supervisory union. And if that were to happen, that $1.5 million that is funding programs at BFA would stay in-house. Our students would still have choice. The majority are going to those 2 high schools. And they would still have other choice to other high schools through that universal choice. But they would not have access to some of the private
So
schools.
BFA is not on that list would not be included in the school choice for our
I think
town?
if it was our 6 towns in FNESU that merged together, and that's what caused choice to go away, then it would only be those 2 high schools. The stuff that the state is contemplating, if we're in a larger district that includes St. Albans or includes Swanton.
I only say because it seems it's such a huge part of our budget, and obviously as we're all so concerned about what is happening with taxes, is it worth revisiting that again, or is that ship sailed? Is it too late for?
I don't think the ship has sailed, and it is, to be honest with you, we're gonna talk about that under my board report, that district consolidations, whether, we're not fully merged in FNESU, we have a supervisory union because we didn't successfully fully merge into one district. So a district consolidation could happen at this level where the NMV and the ER boards choose to merge together into a district. So you wouldn't have the SU structure anymore. But the things that are being contemplated at the state level are larger mergers.
And theoretically, that would further reduce our tax burden in supporting these schools, theoretically.
So at a minimum, your $1.5 million that's going, well, it would be more than that. Because it would be whatever you're paying in total to all the choice towns would then be supporting programming in just the ER schools. Just the ER.
Thinking.
Just the
out loud.
FNESU schools.
Yeah, I think it's certainly something that could be contemplated. We really need to wait and see what the legislature
Right.
does, because.
Well, that's why I was wondering where's.
Point by
Right.
May. In your packet is the very early copy of the meeting warning. This version has an article in there, just kind of as a placeholder, if we do want to move any of the fund balance over into the capital reserve fund. It's in there as Article 5. Again, I don't think it's enough money to worry about, and I would recommend that you take that piece out. Say there are 3 seats that are up for election. They're all 3-year terms. In Bakersfield, the seat that Arlene has is up. In Berkshire, it would be Sam's seat, and then in Sheldon, Miranda's seat is up for election. Those petitions are due on January 26th, either to Emily Fecto, who's the town clerk in Berkshire and is our district clerk. If you get them to me by that day, I will get them to her, and she knows that I'm collecting them as well. And so if, hoping folks are interested in running again, if you need the paperwork for that, just shoot me an email. And if there are people watching this online, or on YouTube after that are interested, you can reach out to me or to Courtney, and we'll get the paperwork and the instructions on how to apply for those seats. And so with that, any other questions, reports, corrections, or information that we're not already chasing after that you would like for next meeting? And we'll say we should have firm CLA numbers between Christmas and New Year's, so I will incorporate those into the tax rate projections. We will not have a new yield number worth anything until at least the town meeting break, I would speculate. And then those tuition numbers, the big movers, and any changes that people make on health insurance are gonna have an impact as well.
And it's possible the governor will make an announcement about some sort of buy down from the.
I don't think so.
You don't think that's
I think that
gonna-
will be driven by the legislature, not by
Okay.
the governor.
After budgets are voted on.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So that won't be a driver for any change?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. All right, anything, you had a few more non-budget things.
Yeah, and I
in
think
your-
I have them there as placeholders, and I don't think I have an update on any of
Okay.
those construction things for you.
Okay, all right, thanks, Morgan. Anything else? Anything else for Morgan? And so Lynn, just to pause quickly, I realize I didn't acknowledge that we had Julie Cattell joining us, came in a little late, and I just wanted to check and see, Julie, if you were interested in anything for public comment, or if you're just here to watch the meeting.
Just here to watch, but thank you.
Of course, thank you. Okay, Lynn, you're good to go.
So I will start, we'll start with personnel, and I'm gonna start with the last thing in personnel first. So, it's always with mixed emotion when I have to announce that someone has made the decision to retire, especially someone like Sandy Alexander, our Montgomery principal. She's been with us for 11 years, I believe, in Montgomery, has done a fantastic job. And we're very happy for Sandy that she is on a path to retirement. It's well deserved. You will be missed in Montgomery. The last piece that I have in the personnel section is, and I do hope that you will go in there, you'll have these slides. Sandy's letter is beautiful. And I hope that the board members read that, but I would ask the board to make a motion to accept Sandy's intent to retire letter.
Well, I will make the motion, but I'll preface it by saying that you will be so missed. And I was on the Montgomery board that hired Sandy after a really rigorous process and principal search when we were a single district board so many years ago. And many of my kids went through the school with Sandy, and you're just a much loved member of Montgomery community and NMV as a whole, and I just want to thank you so much, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much.
So
It's scary.
So I'm sure, I really can understand that. So with a heavy heart, I will make the motion to accept Sandy's resignation, and we will do that by roll. Michelle?
Sadly, I.
Lisa?
Regretfully, I.
Sam,
Aye.
Miranda,
Aye.
Audrey,
Aye.
Mary is an aye. Thank you so much, Sandy. Yeah.
Okay. So I will shift to hiring. We have most of this is informational. We have Stephen Davio, we're very happy to have working for us this year. He has been a rotating long-term sub, and we're welcoming lots of babies to FNESU families this year. And I think by the end of the year, we'll have completed 4 long-term sub rotations and will be working through the remainder of this school year. So he is filling in grade 2, starting in March, and he is just shifted to Sheldon on December 1. So these are gonna roll right into each other. I think he's already completed 2. Yeah. Resignations for next year. Lara Robtoy has given us her resignation, the school nurse from Montgomery Elementary School. So I would ask the board to make a motion to accept Lara's letter of resignation.
I'll make that motion. And Lynn, just to clarify, the hiring for Stephen did not require a motion?
Oh wait, we did put him on, it does require a motion, I'm sorry.
Jamie got
We put him on contract, so yes, it does.
Okay, so,
Thank
so I'll first make a motion to hire Stephen Davio.
Yes.
All right, we'll do that by roll. Lisa,
Aye.
Michelle,
Aye.
Audrey,
Aye.
Miranda,
Aye.
Sam,
Aye.
and Mary is an aye. And then a motion to accept the resignation of Lara Robtoy. Lisa,
Aye.
Michelle,
Aye.
Audrey,
Aye.
Miranda,
Aye.
Sam,
Aye.
and Mary is an aye.
We have the same remaining open positions that we've had. The half-time health teacher at Berkshire, paraeducator. Montgomery is looking for behavior technician, paraeducator. Sheldon is looking for a math intervention teacher. So those are things we would love to fill, but we haven't had candidates to do that. It's that time of the year where staff members have had to let us know if they intend to make a salary advancement, and I won't read all of these to you, but these are the people that notified us by December 1st. You have most people, if not all, are making a single jump. I don't think you have any double jumps. You have 1 double jump this year. So it's just a little information that it helps Morgan in the budget to know when they're going to make their column movement. That's all I have under personnel. So this is that time of the meeting where we're going to test the principals here and see who wants to jump in and describe what we're seeing with these pictures.
I got it.
You got it? All right. Should we start on which corner, Kevin?
I am the upper left with that beautiful red wall, and that's our harvest dinner. So every year we invite the community and our seniors, and the kids serve, and it's a beautiful day. And we have less student population this year, and we had more people attend. So it was fantastic.
Awesome.
I'll jump in. Mine's the bottom right. This is our annual Macy Day Balloon Parade, and because myself and some of our student population are allergic to latex, they found a new way to do the balloon parade this year. So, and they're going to improve on it next year too. But it's an exciting event. Everyone looks forward to. All the 3rd through 6th grade make balloons, and the K1, 2, 7, 8 are the audience as the kids do their march through the building with their balloons and some of the staff with instruments. It's a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
Mine is the bottom left, and it is part of our work towards our food drive that we stuffed the bus, and it was a tremendous success. It's highlighted in my report. That is, what we did was we had all this food in big boxes, and then we asked Hannaford for a donation of reusable shopping bags. So the little kids separated all the food into the reusable shopping bags so they were easy to carry. And we stuffed them all on the bus and delivered it. So That's great. The kids.
Well, by process of elimination. So what we are looking at is, I believe, and I am so sorry, I am terrible at pictures. I don't know why, but that is, I believe that looks like Miss Thayer's classroom, if I am not mistaken. And we've got a group of 7th graders, and they are working with a couple of our 1st graders doing some mentorship. Oh, thanks. I can't see
You all
that
passed.
pressure.
Fantastic.
Relax.
Work.
I could have made it bigger. Oh. Jeez. Oh, wait, no, that's not Berkshire. No.
So
Showed me how to be bigger.
I'm going to shift back to Montgomery for a moment. So for board members, we'll spend some time on this. I don't know if you want to come back to this at the end, but I'll go through the timeline here. Actually, we don't have to do the questions today. We could do that in January. We'll have time.
Yeah.
We'll have time. So in this slideshow, you'll be able to click in to see the full timeline. So I'll ask Courtney to go there now, if she could. That's going to bring you to a Google Doc. I didn't check the permissions on the Google Doc. If you could do that. You already did. Perfect.
I don't see it in here.
It isn't in there. It'll be in the
okay.
slideshow. So we're intending to move quickly. I appreciate Sandy letting us know at this time of the year. It really gives us an advantage in the hiring season to get this posted before the winter break that we're about to have. So we will post this position tomorrow, and then we will I will be at Montgomery tomorrow. I won't have time to meet with the Montgomery staff, but I will be there, and we'll likely send them a message and just let them know that they can come talk to me if they have questions while I'm there. But we will be distributing some stakeholder feedback forms for those staff members to have them give us some insights about what they think is most important for us to look for in the next principal in Montgomery. So the next thing on our timeline is actually tonight, and our objective is to, I would love for you to formally approve this hiring process, developing the finalist board interview questions. We won't finalize those tonight, but they're in this, so you could take a look and we'll talk about it next time. And we'll do that in executive session, so this is not a document that I would want you to share with anyone else. We will review the stakeholder participation feedback plan. We'll determine who of our board members will work with me to do finalist reference checks. So we also will see if there's anyone that's interested in going on site visits. So you have a few minutes to think about that while I get to those parts of the timeline. We'll have some special meetings for interviews, and then really determining the format of the interview. My preference is always in person, unless we're hiring someone from California and it's a screening round. We would want to offer them a virtual option until they become a finalist, but I would recommend to the board that all finalists need to be in person.
Absolutely.
So that staff letter will go out tomorrow. I'll review this timeline and process with them. We'll identify through that stakeholder survey what their priorities are. We'll also release tomorrow an interest survey to the Montgomery stakeholders, and this will include families and educators, also students. If we have any middle school students that want to participate in the process, we're able to do that. So that will be an opportunity Courtney will put out on our social media page, and we'll send it to the Montgomery email group to hit all of the families. The people should fill that out if they would like to be considered for that. We're going to move quickly, so we'll close those interest surveys next week on the 11th, and then we'll take a look to try to build a comprehensive representation of a Montgomery screening committee. So we'll try to look at who has interest, and we'll try to build a really strong team. We'll pull that screening committee together on December 16th for their first meeting. That's usually a short one. We get everybody in so they can access their school spring account. We review expectations of confidentiality, and that's something I will hammer home, because that is something that we have experienced in the past where confidentiality was not sustained, and we actually lost a really strong candidate in one of our previous searches, so it's incredibly important. They will review the candidate packets that have come in so far at that point, and they'll start looking at interview questions. They'll get to take a look at the themes that emerge from the feedback we get from the Montgomery educators, so they can have that in their mind's eye as they're looking at candidates. And then we'll just do a confirmation at that meeting that if they're going to serve on the committee, they have to be present for all the meetings, or they won't. We'll go to an alternate. And then we'll develop our final interview questions. On January 6th, the screening committee will meet for the second time. They'll select the candidates that they're going to interview, and they will finalize their interview questions. On January 7th, Courtney and I will work to contact the finalists to set up those interviews. And then on January 12th, the screening committee will hold the interviews with those candidates. So that gives us some time. We'll ask the screening committee to go through the candidates that they've interviewed. We'll ask them to take a look at what are their strengths and possible areas that, you know, someone might need some support with, or areas that they're concerned about. And we'll ask them to recommend a minimum of 2 and a maximum of 3 candidates to move forward to the board round. Between January 13th and January 22nd, Michelle Irish will help myself and a board member. Courtney will also assist in conducting site visits, especially if a candidate is an acting sitting principal. So we will work through that, and we will also work to complete comprehensive reference checks in advance of the board's interview process, which I propose that we hold on, I'm skipping ahead a little bit, January 22nd. Is that right? Yes. So I'm proposing a special meeting, that Courtney will warn a special meeting, and we will do that. Also on that night, I propose that we have stakeholder engagement opportunities, so opportunities for students to meet the candidates, staff members to meet the candidates, and the community to meet the candidates before the board gets to meet the candidates. I propose that we do what we've done in the past with Courtney, synthesizing all of that feedback and building those reports for us to review while we're interviewing the other candidates. So she's very quick, everything is digital, so she can pull that together for the board to review at the end of that process.
Is there any flexibility on that interview date?
You can tell me that there needs to be. This
Can
is
it
just
be
a
on the
proposal.
21st, the Wednesday, instead of the 22nd?
It can't be the 21st because we have an SU meeting. Oh wait, I have
No.
2 SU meetings in my
We
calendar.
have an SU meeting on the 20th for now, on Tuesday the 20th.
So it could be on the 21st. Yeah.
Okay.
Oops,
That would
I
be my
haven't got that.
preference.
Okay. So Courtney, I'll have you make that change.
The 21st, Wednesday.
So my intention would be the next day, after the decision is made, I would make an offer to the candidate, and then there's some time that typically passes after that offer is made for the candidate to think about it, for us to talk about salary and compensation. I would release the information to the school community, to the community at large, but not before I had a candidate who had a signed contract. And sometimes that takes a few days before we can get that out. So what questions, comments, suggestions does the board have?
Is there like a minimum amount of applicants you would wait until you proceeded with all this? It's pretty fast.
It is pretty fast, but it's important to be timely because people they're signing contracts for next year at this time of the year. So if there's an experienced principal that's interested, we need to move fast for them to be a viable candidate for us. So we will look at, I wouldn't want to give a number because we have had rounds where we've had 10, but when we do a preview, there are only 4 that are viable or 5 that are viable. So I think it depends on the quality of the candidates. I mean, I wouldn't proceed if we had 1. We would slow it down, and that's something that I always reserve the right to do if we're in the process and we don't feel like when we're reviewing in the first round, I'll have Jamie repost right after the first of the year, and I'll push this back a couple of weeks but I don't really have a number. It's I want a variety of quality candidates to be able to push forward. I will say though, just so that we're going in this in a realistic manner, there is a shortage of education leaders across the state. There's a shortage of educators in general. So I have high hopes. Montgomery's a great school, great community. I have high hopes that this will be a job that's appealing to people.
Great.
So if there are no other comments or questions, Mary, I just would want the go-ahead from the board that this is an appropriate timeline to move forward with.
Yeah, I think it's a robust process and pretty fast-paced, but we do have to kind of capitalize on the window we have, and you'll course correct if we're not getting the kind of caliber of candidates that we are looking for. And then you want now to know who might be, I mean, I've done a lot of those reference checks and site visits over the years, so I'm happy to be, I don't know how many people you want doing that. I'm happy to do that.
Would love to hear, there are a few things. I have now lost it in all of the tabs that are open. Oh, here it is. So I would want, you could either tell Courtney now or you could email Courtney. I would say 1 or 2 board members interested in serving on the interview committee. I wouldn't really want it to be more than that because the board is going to get the opportunity to interview the finalists in the end. I think 1 is more common in these processes, but two we can make work. So if you're interested in that, I would ask you to let Courtney know that. The other piece is going on site visits. If someone feels like within that range of dates from January 13th through the 22nd or 21st now, they have some flexibility to be able to do that with us. We can be flexible in when we schedule those site visits. I would love for you to let me know that, and then digging into the reference checks. So there's really 3 tasks that I would ask the board to think about. So do you want it to be that they email Courtney, or do you want people to volunteer tonight?
I would say, why don't we have people email Courtney? I think it would be helpful so folks can look at all those dates, knowing that some of them are totally fixed. It gives people time to check their respective calendars and make sure it aligns before they're volunteering for something that they might actually have a conflict around. So if we can kind of provide that to everyone on the board, and then people can reach out with interest and availability and go from there. Okay.
Now, last month I had intended to bring you assessment data, and before the board meeting I pulled it. I think I mentioned that to you at that board meeting because I was getting the sense that some of the data wasn't quite correct. So I've pulled data, and I am pretty certain about the data points that I have now. So I've looked at data in a variety of ways, and I'm going to start off with looking at the VTCAP assessment. That's something that's taken across the state. And I've taken some comparison data from our 3rd through 8th grade students, and I've pulled out specifically NMV, and I'm looking at NMV in the blue, and I'm looking at FNESU in general in the red. And in the yellow, it is how the state compares in terms of the statewide average performance in the VTCAP assessment. So you can see in literacy, we have 4th grade, we've put a lot of time and effort into that science of reading program that we shifted to last year. So it's exciting for us to see that we're performing better at the 3rd and 4th grade level than we have. We're starting to see growth there, and I'm feeling good about continuous growth. So you have a couple of areas where we're right at or just below the statewide average. In the 4th grade, we're a couple of percentage points above the statewide average in NMV, and you can see how that trends across to 8th grade. when I'm looking at the comparisons of NMV and FNESU, NMV is tracking slightly higher than the FNESU averages.
Just making sure we're on the same side.
Yes. Am I talking about things that aren't up there? Okay. I'm gonna zoom through it. Oh, she left. Are you gonna move slides? So I looked at, the next thing I looked at was, I was thinking about, okay, the VTCAP assessments taken in the spring, generally March, April. I think most people did it between March and April last year. We also take, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong slide. So this slide looks at the VTCAP performance levels by school. So it's alphabetical from, it's not alphabetical. It is Berkshire on the left, then Bakersfield, then Montgomery, then Sheldon. And it's looking at the performance levels. So you could see the blue is exceeding, the green is achieving, the yellow is approaching, and the red is significantly below. So you can see where each of the schools are performing. So I took that same, I wanted to get a look at a similar assessment. If you go to the next slide, Morgan, the STAR literacy assessment is also something that they take in the spring, and no, can you go back? I have a visual on mine. I don't know why it's not there. So you'll see when you have the slides in front of you, there's data there. So I took the STAR literacy spring assessment data and I looked at the state benchmark scores for that, and if you overlap those with how students performed in that same time period on the VTCAP, the state benchmark score for STAR is a pretty good indicator of how they're going to score on the VTCAP assessment. So if you look at the difference between the VTCAP piece by school and then the performance by school on the STAR, you'll see they're pretty similar in terms of their performance levels. And then I took it and I thought, okay, we know that each summer we have a little bit of regression in our students. Where do we start this year? So you can look at where they ended the year and where they're beginning of the year. And so I did that for all 4 of the schools as well. I did the same for mathematics, and I took a look at, again, blue NMV, red FNESU, and yellow state. Our students are, the scores across the board, across the state, are not where we would like them. And we have invested a lot of effort into improving both our mathematics and our literacy scores. Our early grades are outperforming the state. Our 3rd through 5th grade in NMV are outperforming the state. In FNESU, the 3rd grade is outperforming the state. So you could see, again, NMV schools are outperforming the FNESU average and in all of the indicators, and we're coming in just under the state for NMV, we're coming in just under the state average in 6th through 8th grade. I looked at VTCAP math by school, and that's what you're seeing there. Again, it goes Berkshire, Bakersfield, Montgomery, then Sheldon. That was taken in the spring, and then I pulled up how did they do on the STAR assessment, again with the state benchmark, and it is a pretty good indicator. So I think that we have the STAR assessment that we're using is the right assessment for us to be using, and it's really actionable. The principals are strengthening their team's approaches to taking the STAR assessment data and digging in deeply and then using that to intervene with students at the skill level to push them over into the next performance indicator. And I will say let me finish. I'll finish the data and then I'll make my point. The next one is the fall STAR math assessment, and you can see how our students performed in that by school compared to how they did in the spring. And I think that it's important to remember that this data does not reflect growth in our students. It's reflecting a point in time how each student did. Another way that we need to look at the data is to look at cohort growth from year to year, and an even better way to look at the data is to look at it from student to student. So you can see how many Lexiles they're growing over a year. So you could have a student that makes tremendous gains and they've grown more than a year and a half, but they still might not be in the green or the blue because some of our students are starting way below. So it takes some time to catch them up. And I think that, that's something that we're all working really hard to do. I've seen teacher meetings in most of our buildings at this point and seeing them talking about the data and talking about the interventions that they're putting into place. And I will say, if you just go back to even, you could stop on the math comparison data with the rest of the state. We're not where we want to be yet. If you can go back, I think 3 slides. Right there. We're not that's okay. We're not where we want to be yet, but I'm proud of where we are because we are starting with students. The number of students that we serve who are living in poverty puts them in a different starting point. The research is clear about that. They have more ground to cover, more ground to make up from where they start to when we start testing them in 3rd grade. And we are doing this in school systems that are not funded the way other school systems in the state of Vermont are funded. Our people are working really hard to move our students, and we're doing the best that I feel that we can do with the resources that we currently have, and I'm proud of the growth that we're making, and we are on the path. We're going to continue to push and chase higher proficiency levels with our students.
I just want to add, I came from a different district, and our kids in 6th grade walked in at 70% proficient, right? So they might end, we'll say, as 78%. But the reality is, I agree with what you're saying. It's a different level of education from their families. It's just different.
Yeah.
It's not better, it's not worse, it's just different.
Right.
And I couldn't be prouder of the teachers that we have up here and their commitment that they have towards every single kid. There isn't a kid that, I feel, there's not a kid that gets missed. Mm-hmm. And it's just amazing to see that up here.
I've watched some things happen, and I'll just shout out both Montgomery and Bakersfield. I've had the opportunity to see some of these conversations happen where teachers are moving kids from one proficiency level to another and celebrating that success and having the opportunity to reflect on. You might have had a student who for 3 years has been in the red, and they have been working and working and working with interventionists, and they've been working hard themselves, and they make it to the yellow, or even better, they make it to the green. And the investment that these teachers and these teams have, and how proud they are of those students when they can move them over the line. They are genuinely working hard to make that happen for our students. So, and I'm also proud of my principals, because my principals are working really hard to create the conditions in the schools so that the teachers have the time and resources that they need in order to be able to do this work well, because this isn't just doing more of the same and expecting to get a better outcome. It's really digging into that data and getting a different outcome, because we're being so much more targeted and deliberate with both the first instruction and the intervention. So I am going to move off from data, and I'll spend a little time talking with the board about school redistricting. So on this page, you have the first, at the top, where it says School Redistricting Committee Final Report. There was a report, I've been talking about this with the board all fall. The School Redistricting Task Force completed their work, and yesterday they submitted their final report to the legislature. So I'll be honest, I have not read all of the final report, but it is linked in there for you to read. So there are a lot of things for us to consider and to talk about. So tonight, we're going to talk about those we're gonna have a discussion about the options that have been considered for governance mergers across the state, but in particular in our region. We're going to talk about, we're gonna prepare for a regional meeting that's going to happen next week on December 11th. It's gonna happen between all of the school district boards in Franklin County, all of the superintendents, I'm assuming CFOs and business managers, and other legislative leaders in Franklin County. We're all coming together to talk about Act 73 and school redistricting. So this meeting's gonna be held next Thursday, December 11th in St. Albans at the Hardeck Lodge at 6 p.m. So I do hope that board members can mark your calendars for that. Courtney will be warning that meeting later this week. And I haven't had a chance to say that to you, but it'll be, the warning is going to be standardized for all the boards. So tonight's discussion is really important because tonight's discussion is going to guide some of the things that you're going to reflect based on what has NMV done, or what is NMV, what are you thinking about in terms of the work that's happening associated with Act 73? So our key focus for today is we're gonna review Act 73 and redistricting. And Sam, I feel like I need to apologize to you in advance because you're coming in the 11th hour and I'm gonna give you a lot of information.
That's okay.
And I can try to catch you up if you want to set a time. I'm gonna ask you to think let me just preface this. It's really difficult to think about any of this because people have a human emotional reaction when you start thinking about changing systems and structures connected to your child's school. And it is really important for us to think through both positives and negatives that can come from this work. So we'll identify potential opportunities that could exist if our governance structure was within a larger system. We'll work to identify potential risks and or concerns from being merged within a larger system, positive impacts that we can imagine from a foundation formula, and some negative impacts from a foundation formula. And then if there are wonders we have about partnerships or ideas about configurations within our region, we'll talk about those things. And I'll ask you to discuss whether or not the NMV board wants to take a formal position about any of this, but you will be asked to share part of your discussion in what this board has been thinking about Act 73. So for those of you that have been on the board, we've been building towards these conversations since Act 73 was passed. So I'm going to review rather quickly, and you can slow me down if you have questions or comments. So I'll jump in to the next slide, Courtney. At the top it says review of Act 73. That is also a link. So Act 73 I think is 180 something pages of light reading if anybody really wants to dig in and see what's there. The school redistricting task force that we just talked about considered a variety of governance models. Their task was to create up to 3 maps that reflected merged districts across the state. They did not actually do that. Instead, what they did was they're proposing no forced mergers. The map that you see on this page is part of the proposal that came out of that task force. They're proposing cooperative education service areas. So what you see there is those are the superintendent regions that exist right now. So we would land in that green region, which represents the whole of the Champlain Valley. So those are all the school systems from Richford down to what's the most, Shoreham. So it's all of Franklin, Chittenden, Grand Isle, and 2/3 of Addison. So the idea is that we would share some of the resources that, like transportation, special education, things like this in this type of model to try to use those shared resources to get to scale to try to save some money. This is modeled off what's called a BOCES model in other states, so there is some research behind this. They also are proposing in their model that they would like to see, if you can go to the next slide, voluntary mergers centered around comprehensive high schools. So at one time, this redistricting committee was considering a map that looked like this. And there's one on the left that includes the historic private academies. The one on the right is public high schools only. The theory here is that we can do better for our students if we build comprehensive regional high schools so that we can have greater scale in those schools to be able to offer more opportunities for our students. So in our region, Maple Run and Enosburg were identified as the two that would be comprehensive high schools, and Missisquoi was I think they called it a possible additional. They didn't come out and say that there would be no other high schools, but they talked about investing in those comprehensive regional high schools. They did not ultimately push a map like this forward because in the original proposal, these would have been forced mergers where these regions would have come together. Instead, they want districts and communities to talk with one another and come up with voluntary plans for communities to agree what would make the most sense in the region. The school redistricting committee also had another proposal that they spent a lot of time on, and this was the CTE map that was proposed by Scott Beck and I can't remember his name. David Welk. So this map would have resulted in 7 supervisory unions and 7 school districts. So if you look on the northwest corner, that yellow big area, we would have been partnered with Missisquoi Valley, Maple Run, Franklin West, and Franklin Northeast would come together to be a district. And this goes to your question earlier about what does choice look like if it was a merger like this and we were a district. Students within that whole region would, in theory, have choice to any high school within that region, but not outside of the region and not to any of the private academies.
Sounds good to me.
So if there's a district, there's no choice. There are no kids leaving the district and taking tuition dollars with them. This map, as I said, had 7 districts and 7 supervisory unions. So the 7 supervisory unions are centered along the regions of the state where many of those historic academies and other private schools exist. So within those 7 supervisory unions, there would be broader choice offered for all students who live in those regions, in theory, with this map. The committee ultimately did not vote in favor of supporting this map, but it was a map that that some people were interested in, and it is a map that is likely during the legislative session. I think we're going to see other maps emerge during the legislative session. I think the governor's been very clear on social media that he doesn't feel the task force met the charge, and this doesn't mean that the intent of the law goes away. So I think that Lisa's going to be in the enviable or unenviable position of getting a lot of maps thrown at her by a lot of different groups, because I think people are still going to try to navigate how do we create some forced mergers before the end of the legislative session. So a couple of ways that we saw people look at our region is we saw NMVU, Alberg, and Franklin Northeast put together. That brings us to just over 4,000 students. That's what you see on the left part of the screen. We also saw another part of the regional conversation where we had Alberg, NMVU, Franklin Northeast, Maple Run, and most of Franklin West, which would be BFA Fairfax area. I think a part of Franklin West is parsed out into another region. So to give you an idea of the scale of mergers that were talked about for our region, the more limited scope was around 4,095 students, and it's mostly NMVU, district in FNESU with Alberg. And then that's the larger, more of a full county plus Alberg model. We also heard people talk about a county model that would not include Alberg. So just to give you some context. I want to remind you next about, we spent some time learning earlier about the difference between supervisory unions and supervisory districts. And we talked about, I won't go into all of this because it's in depth. I think that you understand the difference between structures. We're a supervisory union because we have two districts that function separate from one another underneath us. But if we were like MVU, they all feed into the same high school and no one there has choice dollars that they take anywhere else. So they're a supervisory district, okay? And they only have one board that governs that instead of us with 3 boards. There's information on this slide for you to go back and look at about board representation, how the governance model works, which you all know. In SUs, you have independent school districts maintaining separate budgets, and we're here having conversations about what's Enosburg Richford going to do and how's that going to impact us. And if we were one district, it would be one budget. It would be much more seamless. Single districts have that unified budget. For us, there's a lot of things that are duplicative. One example is audits. We have 3 audits. Single districts have 1. We as supervisory unions are not allowed to own property, so we have to lease our supervisory union office. We also have to lease our alternative program spaces because those are SU programs. It's not very financially efficient. Supervisory districts are allowed to own property. We have no borrowing authority as a supervisory union. Districts can borrow to meet their payroll. We run 3 separate payrolls because we have our 2 districts in the supervisory union. There are some systems in the state that have as many as 17 districts within their system, so they're running 17 of everything. 17 assessment plans and 17 payrolls and 17 audits. If you are a district, you would have 1 payroll that you would run. So it's just a reminder of those 2 differences as we get into these conversations. At our last meeting in November, we talked about the various types of school choice in Vermont. And we talked about how we have policies in Enosburg, Richford, and in NMV where we allow for choice within elementary school choice within our districts. But we can't cross from one district to the other unless we meet this. We have this one tiny little criteria that we agreed that there's some cross-district choice for people who live up on Black Falls. It's Black Falls, Richford, but you can only get there by going through Montgomery. So you're really part of the Montgomery community, but technically that property is in Richford. So this policy allows anyone that has to drive through another community to get to their community school to apply for choice across district. So this visual down here really reflects the type of choice that we have within our system. So if you look, do you see how on the far left it's broken into 2 parts? And the lighter version on the top, that represents all of your NMV students. If you track that over to the right, at the top, you'll see that reflects all the students you educate within this district. So those are all your pre-K through 8 students. And then that bottom section that is a little orange, that's kind of breaking off your NMV students, those are all of your high school students. And if you track that all the way down to the bottom, you see how it almost looks like it's getting into like a bigger strand and then a smaller strand and then 2 tiny strands. So Morgan's done a really beautiful job of reflecting of that big chunk of orange that you have, your high school students, that top part, that top section, those are the percentage of students, those are the number of students who choose to attend high schools within FNESU already. And then if you think about, as you're thinking about the potential for larger mergers, that next smaller strand, those are students who choose to attend public schools in our county. So if we were merged at a county level in this region, those students would still have the same choice that they currently do. Those two smaller strands, the first smaller strand, those are students that attend public schools outside of the county. That could still happen in a merged district through universal high school choice, through the application process for that. The last strand that you see on the outside, those are the number of students who are exercising the school choice that exists. So you have a very small fraction of students who are taking those tuition dollars and they're going outside of the county. And it could be to a private school, or they are going to private schools because they're taking the dollars with them. Any questions on that?
Then can you speak to this piece around school choice and what was codified in the Articles of Agreement under Act 46? And how is that going to then kind of collide or kind of meet up with the kind of task at hand with Act 73?
So Act 46 was different in that it was voluntary. So communities had to vote for a merger proposal. And if you remember, those were not the best of times in our communities. Those were really hard conversations that were had during that time. There was a merger proposal that would have taken all of our schools and it would have created a district. And the students in the strands at the bottom that are now taking their tuition dollars and they're going outside of Franklin Northeast. So for right now, if you think about within this budget, see how it breaks down and you have those two tiny ones and then the next larger one in the middle, all of those kids are taking tuition dollars away from Franklin Northeast schools. They're taking that kind of, it's not a voucher, but they're taking their tuition out. That's what the crux of the dilemma was when our communities were asked to vote on Act 46. They did not want to merge into a district because they wanted to protect students' rights for choice there to take those tuition dollars. The distinction now is under Act 73, what's written into the law is that these would be forced mergers. So the rights, things that are codified in the Articles of Agreement would not prevent that from happening under forced mergers in Act 73. So I think there are really hard conversations that are having to be had, and I think that, when we're struggling with budgets over and over and over again, there's only so long that you can keep talking through the lens of cutting, and until you get to a place where you have to look at what's our structure. Is there a way that we could do this more affordably, either a larger governance structure or with the number of schools that you're operating? And no one wants to talk about that. I understand that it's immensely, it's heartbreaking for people to think in that way. But I think we also have to put on a scale, as a state, are we going to just continue stripping away resources, or are we going to make some of the hard decisions that could lead to operating structures that look really different than they do now? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so just to clarify, under Act 73, if ultimately the map is presented to us and it is not a choice, but it is a mandate, that will supersede the original Articles of Agreement when NMV came together under the FNESU umbrella, and that will override the existing school choice that we have for, like you said, it's a small number of students and families that take those dollars outside of the county.
Right. It depends on what the map looks like, Mary. So if the map comes back and the map has you in a governance structure that's a supervisory union, there's a potential that those tuition dollars could still be there, but then you still are battling the same problem where you're trying to operate schools and you're sending your money out. instead of building better opportunities that would be more appealing to families to stay in. So if it comes back that the map that we're presented with is a merged district, then yes, you lose that. And I know that those lines on the bottom are not going to want to lose that, and we're in a position as a state where we have to make some really hard positions for the good of the whole. And I think that's, as painful as it's going to be, we're going to have to keep that in mind. So at this point, I'm going to open up a discussion, and I'm just going to ask Courtney to take notes, not minutes, but notes for you, Mary, because I want you to be a part of the discussion. And when we go to this meeting next week, they're going to ask you to share what have the discussions been like with your board. So I'm going to have her just do a thought capture here for you. So I would like for you to talk as a board. What are some of the potential opportunities? I mean, it could be principals too. Potential opportunities or outcomes if we were merged within a larger system.
I'll start. I already thought of a couple of things. So some concerns would be like even within our union, when we have weather in Bakersfield and we're looking at a snow day or making road action accountability for our community could look very different than what Fairfax or St. Albans or even within our district, Montgomery, it looks all very different. So if you have a governing board that is probably where the higher population, I would say probably St. Albans, if we're looking at just the Franklin County district model, that decision-making process for people who live out here could be a little bit different. And then also in the same regard, because we are rural, if there are parents or concerns for, school concerns, it's not maybe the most convenient in bad weather or not in bad weather to have to travel an hour to get to your nearest superintendent or board meeting. Yeah.
So I think Courtney's going to capture those as potential risks or negative outcomes. Yeah. I'm wondering if we have any opportunities. Let's try to mine for what are some things that could happen if we were a larger system?
Cost savings would be huge, first and foremost. It would be nice to be able to have football, say, in our area, or something where there's more students available to have lacrosse or, different. I'm going athletics because that's what my kids do, but to have different groups or things put together would be nice.
I'm imagining there are various special ed teachers that could maybe help some students who have a more unique challenge that could be shared between the schools.
Coming from a large district, previous to this, one of the benefits of larger districts is the bigger staff, which means when you get together for something like a professional development day, you have more peers that are like you instead of one-offs. We do have multiple one-offs in our SU just based on buildings and size and all that, so you do get more of that collaboration time, and the professional development is a little bit more authentic and intentional for people who have unique positions. They're not quite so alone anymore.
Think about when you have scale in a school, you can think about the programs that you're wanting to build in a school where when you have really small schools, you're trying to figure out what proportion of a teacher you could get. So I think that there are some both opportunities for student experiences that could be different, and there are some opportunities for itinerant staff that we currently have to have more of those as full-time positions. What else?
Courtney sent this out to all of us, right? That what we worked on already?
No, not everybody came to
You just,
the retreat.
you just sent it to, no, I'm
Yeah.
saying the email from Courtney today.
It was just to you two to just refresh what we talked
Oh,
about last week.
Yeah.
I thought it was
Did you
everybody.
send that to me
Okay,
too?
Yeah, you're on it.
Okay.
The document right now.
okay.
So the SU board had a retreat to have a preview of these conversations. So I think that's what Miranda is talking
Sorry.
about. No, it's okay. So if you want to think about, is there anything that you want to add?
No, we have a lot there.
What are some potential risks or negative outcomes that people are worried about with a larger system?
Loss of our small community hubs.
If schools were closed.
Yeah.
Could I just jump in about the school closure piece, because I hear that so often? We have to keep in mind that the only entity that's gonna close schools is our board, or whatever our board looks like at that time. The state's not gonna come in and close schools.
It's not part of the governance, Lisa. I hear it all the time too. It's not part of the map and the governance redistricting piece, but I think people are understanding that the boards in a larger district will have to have some hard conversations, and I think people are understanding that eventually that could happen in places. But Lisa's right, in the first phase, that is not gonna happen from the state. Other worries that people have?
Well, we've identified over the years that we have an exceptionally awesome after-school and LEAPS programming across our system, and that it's not something that all systems have comparable programs. And so I think that would be an important thing for us to kind of have kind of spoken to, that's so important in our communities, and something that I think would be really hard to lose in our communities. And I'd say also our special programs are one of our biggest strengths at the SU level. People across the state are looking to our programs as examples of what kind of has to be done in order to support those students. So, hopefully that would be something that we could continue to build upon, both our after-school offerings and our special programs, regardless of what the configuration looks like. And our small K through 8s in each of the towns, as Audrey spoke to, are, the lifeblood of each of the communities, are really precious. They're anchors for our families, and so I understand that there are no guarantees moving forward, and there are going to be pain points. I would love to see, can we talk about reconfiguration in a way, perhaps merged middle schools and merged high schools, while we are able to hopefully maintain our K through 5s, or our pre-K through 5 or pre-K through 6, however we define middle school in a potentially new system. I know the issue then becomes class sizes that are mandated by the AOE. Are we then going, if we have merged middle schools, are we then going to have micro schools in each of the towns? And that, those are some unknowns that are hard to kind of quantify at the moment. But I'm hoping that, yeah, it's such a difficult needle to thread. I really do not want to see any of our 4 towns lose their schools. And at the same time, we have these mandates from the state and these increasing financial pressures around how many buildings can we continue to operate. And if we want to provide the opportunities that other systems around the state are able to provide their students, can we continue to do it operating this many schools?
So I think it becomes a question of, is it a both and or is it an either or? Because I think that our primary focus has to be to prepare our students for their future. And they need experiences and opportunities to be able to do that. And if we're looking at it through the deficit lens, in not course correcting at all, we will continue to take away instead of building. So when I think about the opportunity, I go to, as the instructional leader, what are the opportunities that could get built with more resources when you get to scale? But I hear you, all of those other pieces, Mary, are definitely factors that people care deeply about. And I think it is going to ultimately come to scaling them all out, what is the most important for our students and for our communities. Any other positives or negatives that people want to throw in there?
My challenge, Lynn, is gonna be, if this doesn't save money, I think you're gonna see and hear a real bitter state.
Yeah.
And I just don't see how it's going to immediately. So it may not be part of this conversation, but I just think about it in terms of 10 years from now, 5 years, whatever. It just worries me.
Are you talking about the redistricting
The whole
piece?
thing is, I mean, it seems like it appears, and I don't really know for sure, but it appears this is a financial thing and less about the opportunities that we can provide our students, at least to me. And I do believe that if we combine, we could certainly provide more opportunities. I mean, kids I had before were doing French, Spanish, woodworking, like all these other things that we just can't offer here because of the facility itself, minus the staff, right? I mean, we just don't have the capability. But I just financially, I just worry about our well-being as this pushes forward. It concerns me.
Yeah. I mean, you look at getting smaller in some spaces and larger in others, and then at what point, adding 800 students, as was discussed in our last meeting, to Enosburg. I mean, what is the financial burden of that to save the expense of maintaining a school like ours? It's worrisome.
I think I totally hear that, and I think that they're looking at they're looking at the whole state as a portfolio of buildings and schools. So when they're having these conversations, there's an assumption that there are cost savings, maybe not immediately, because you will need to invest in some infrastructure, because we have not had any of those investments in quite some time in Vermont. And it's also about the costs associated with maintaining the number of buildings that we currently have, in addition to all the deferred maintenance. So I don't think it's gonna all of a sudden cost less, but if we don't do anything and we have to address all of the deferred maintenance in the existing buildings that we have, and we continue down this path, my fear is, let's just go back to the budget that Morgan prepared at the beginning of this meeting. I fear that we're gonna get tremendous pressure from our community, and we'll do what we often do, which is drive down that tax rate by cutting out opportunities for our students. And that gap that exists for our students here in FNESU to those students that are attending schools at the top of the spending is vastly different, and it will continue to grow, because those communities will pass their budgets, and those students will continue to have those opportunities that ours will not. So I can totally see both sides of this coin, and I don't know how it'll all shake out in terms of saving money. It's not going to be cheaper to educate our students, but it is like, because all of our expenses are going to continue to grow, but it is about like at what scale can you do it more efficiently, and look at those opportunities.
And then keep those students here in Vermont to be employed, right?
Yeah.
But, yeah.
And making it affordable to live here.
Right.
That's another piece.
Right.
So let's shift a little bit to foundation formula. So we haven't talked about foundation formula in a while, but the idea is right now we spend per pupil what our taxpayers will support in terms of our per pupil spending and what budget we think we can get approved by our voters. In Act 73, it proposes that there would be a standard foundation formula. So 13,500 I think was the number that was written into Act 73. So in theory, what that means is systems like ours would move up to 13,500 per student, and those systems that are spending around the $20,000 per student mark would slide down. So they would have to reduce opportunities for their students while we're increasing opportunities for our students. So that in theory is the definition of a foundation formula. It's more complicated than that because there are weighted measures in that foundation formula too. So students like we have now that cost more to educate would give added weight. So you get 13,500 plus the weights for the students you're educating. What did I miss? Okay. So thinking about a shift like that, are there any positive impacts you could see as a state moving to a foundation formula? I did miss something. Right now, our communities vote on those budgets. When you shift to a foundation formula, it's just set at the state level, and the community is no longer voting on the budget. You're spending what you can spend within that amount of money. So,
and you said it's the 13.5, but then it's weighted.
Correct.
Which further advantages our population.
Yes.
But wealthier communities are going to be able to vote above and beyond their 13.5 but there's an off ramp, right?
I don't know if that, Morgan and I were talking about that, and maybe Lisa, you can remember. I think that was pulled out in conference committee or sometime late in legislative session. That ability to vote, I think 10% higher or something like that for communities that are coming down.
I don't remember that it was taken out, Lynn. It could have been. But my opinion of Act 73 is it's available to be rewritten this legislative session because the redistricting committee did not do, or task force did not do what they were tasked to do. So I kind of feel like, and maybe I'm going out on a limb here, but I kind of feel like it's fair game to suggest anything at this point because we can always come up with more legislation that can amend Act 73. We have a whole 4 months to do it. So I know that's not the answer you were asking for, but it's my opinion.
We'll look into whether or not that 10% still exists.
It's frustrating because it seems as though yet again the onus and the burden is on us to do this level of problem solving to try to improve and improve our opportunities for our student population. I'm not finding the meat of Act 73. Where is it that they're really intentionally looking at how how the system overall across the state is set up? They're adding a level of bureaucracy with the BOCES model that I don't really see ultimately as having tremendous cost savings, and then putting the burden on us to try to make these really tough decisions about shuttering schools, possibly merging, moving away from school choice.
I don't think that's gonna be on you. Like, I think this is what, and I think that's what Lisa's saying. The task force didn't do what was expected of them.
Yeah.
But it doesn't end there. The legislators are going to see maps this year, because I don't think people want it to be on schools. I think they want to force that the mergers are going to happen, because they feel like that is the way we're ultimately going to get better control of the money.
Because it seems as though it needs a big, broad bird's eye view of this top to bottom, from the bottom of the state to the top of the state. And yeah, we can do and work with the levers we have regionally and with our partners, but until there's some fundamental, like, deep fixes to the system in Vermont around education and the burden on taxpayers and our crumbling infrastructure and all the other myriad issues that we keep having this, like, patchwork of legislation that isn't really fundamentally addressing what we're trying to communicate, is that we are one of the lowest spending systems. We do so much with so little, but we're fundamentally hampered by the way the system is run from the state.
So I'll give an example of a positive impact of a foundation formula. Right now, we struggle to hire teachers. So we don't always have more than, I would say the principals would probably confirm that many of the positions you have between 0 and 3 candidates. And if you're lucky, you have 1 that is either licensed or experienced. Right now, the way it works is that, you know, we've tried to be generous with our teachers. We've tried to get a more competitive salary. They're still, as we go up, other systems around us go up at an equal rate or a faster rate. So we train up our teachers, they move into systems even a half hour down the road where they're making a lot more money, and then we're back at looking at getting new teachers. So one of the potential positives that could come from a foundation formula is we could potentially have more of an equal playing field. So if our teachers had a wage that was more competitive with this region, if there was a larger district, we would not see teachers moving for the money right next door. So we could level up what some of those salaries are, and the research supports that if you want to see improved outcomes for students, the quality of the teacher that's in front of them is the most impactful measure. So for us, that's a problem that we continue to contend with, and it's not an FNESU problem. There's a teacher shortage across the country, and it's not improving. It's actually escalating a bit, so it's something that we do need to respond to. That's a positive potential impact of a foundation formula. Other positive potential impacts would come in the form of student opportunities programming. Potential negative effect of a foundation formula. I will name it because I think that it is important to do so. So the theory is that you get to an equalized tax rate. So if we are merged with all of Franklin County and you have a foundation formula, the tax rates are going to be equalized throughout that merged system. So if our opportunities increase because we're low spending right now, and even though people don't love the tax rates here, we're way lower than most parts of the state. If we increase the opportunities, the tax rate increases. For those systems that are advantaged right now with opportunities, as they decrease opportunities, their tax rates are going to come down. So you're going to see opportunities go up for low spending systems, and tax rates are going to go up for those systems, and opportunities will come down for higher spending systems and tax rates will come down. Anything you want to add?
I think on that point, we know there's no way to predict how far things are going to move. because we don't know what the districts who have been spending more are gonna do and how that's gonna impact the ed fund. We don't know yet what kind of transition mechanism might be added. We don't know what provisions will be in place for districts that want to spend over the amount and what the penalty is for that. Some of the versions we saw had that opportunity for them, but they would be generating significantly more money that would go back into the ed fund, and so that in theory would help us. So there's a lot of unknowns out there, but if the goal of the state is to push everyone to relatively the same spending level, we're all gonna be at relatively the same tax level.
And there's no part of the conversation that's looking at other taxation strategies that aren't tied to property tax?
One of the things that they are starting to look at is splitting out the non-residential tax grand list. I assume the intention is that you might, at that point then, tax businesses at a lower rate than you were taxing second homes and Airbnbs and things like that. They don't have the ability to use that policy lever yet because the grand list for non-homestead hasn't been split out into those categories. But the data exists and they're working towards doing that, and so clearly there's an intent at some point down the road to give them more levers in terms of where they set tax rates. But in terms of like moving to an income base or something more radical than that, there's always discussion, but I don't think there's ever been much momentum behind it.
And there'll continue to be income sensitivity for lower income families.
We think so,
even with a potential tax increase. That levels us, that kind of pulls us up to the level of what the tax rate across a larger merged system might be.
Correct.
You don't know what scale.
Yeah.
So I think we've already covered some of these other pieces in the governance structure, and this is for you to think about, Mary, as someone who will have to try to put the conversation together here. In terms of local control, governance, small schools, tuitioning, do you feel like you have a good sense from the group about those pieces?
Yeah, and certainly I welcome any emails if after the fact anyone wants to kind of weigh in and send. Lynn and I are going to meet tomorrow to try to synthesize some of this, but I'm going to just be working on my statement. Am I doing 2 for FNESU and NMP? So, awesome.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. But so, that's quite a lot of time. It's 20 minutes of time for me theoretically to use and talk, and so I certainly welcome other thoughts. I'm going to be starting to kind of work on my draft over the next week or so for what I would like to say, and I want to make sure I'm representing the board, the board well. So don't hesitate to reach out and share thoughts. It's a little tricky because we may not all be perfectly aligned, but I do feel as though some of the overarching things that we see as drawbacks and benefits, there does seem to be some consensus there. These are very tricky conversations, and I feel like it's not all that far in the rearview mirror that we were struggling with some of these conversations around Act 46, and we have a lot of disparate views certainly across our communities. I kind of like to kind of trust that at the heart of it we care about our students and we care about their opportunities, and we want to see our communities really thriving. So if we center those pieces in the conversation, I will trust that we'll kind of navigate the complexities.
I don't actually recommend that you take a formal position as a board unless you wanted to. I think it is probably at this stage, I think it is just okay to say these are the themes that came out in our conversation.
Yeah.
I don't think that you need to take a formal position or recommend a direction because I don't think we're there yet. I think the legislature has a lot of work to do. To Lisa's point, in the months ahead, we have no idea where they will land at the end of this legislative session, but I think it continues to be really important that we have these conversations when we come together each month because there's a lot of misinformation out there. And to Lisa's point about school closures, that's centered because people are definitely, they're going there with their thinking and, just like the budget conversations, being informed with the real information is important to be able to offer a counter narrative to some of the things that people are reading in the media that are not quite well informed at this point.
I'm really relieved to hear you say that, because if you hadn't said it, Lynn, I was going to say it. We've just sort of thrown ideas around for half an hour here. There's no way that we have enough information to take a board position on anything. And I'm also on the other side of that December 11th conversation because it's going to be a joint board hearing of many boards for the benefit of legislators who will be listening to each board's concerns and recommendations. Unfortunately, I am not going to be able to attend that meeting, but I feel like it's going to be a really important time for legislators to listen to each of the boards and any recommendations or ideas that they have, but nobody's looking for an answer here, and that was not how it was posed to us legislators. It was just basically posed as, this is going to be a listening session for you, and for your convenience, we're getting all the boards in Franklin County together in one place so you can listen to us.
Yeah.
Ready to move.
Yeah, I certainly hear that, Lisa. I think it's premature to make any kind of board stance, and I just welcome the listening session and the opportunity to kind of help them understand who we are, what we stand for, what we're seeking, and we will see how it unfolds over the next many months. I know we're getting on there at the time, so we'll.
Yeah, I'm done except for I have one other, and that is a funding request from Northwest Access TV. So that is something that both the ER board and the SU board considered in their November meetings, and I missed this with you. So Northwest Access does a fantastic job of being our partner by recording all of these and making these meetings accessible for people online and for recording these so people that can't watch them in real time can go back and watch. And we do have a lot of people that watch these meetings, and I think they threw a little data in here, and they said that more than 1,700 people viewed our meetings on NMV on the YouTube channel over the past year. So I think it's impactful that we have our community have access to what's happening at the board level. So the request from Northwest Access is that you will support them. Know that they have lost some of their federal funding, and it's really important for us to continue to have this partnership with them. So I would recommend to the board that you give them their full ask of $2,080.
Is that the same amount as last year, Lynn? Do you remember?
I don't remember.
Give me a sec.
Carly, no, everything goes up, right?
Well, I'm sorry, while he looks, can I just ask one question about going back? The teachers union and negotiations and the health insurance negotiations, is that gonna be done at a district level theoretically, or would that be done at a state level?
I mean, it's currently done at the state level. It's been done at the state level for many years at this point.
Health insurance.
Health insurance.
Yeah,
Is
not
that the
our
question?
teach, well, she said teacher's contract and
Oh.
health insurance.
Okay.
So health insurance is done at the state level. It's not something that we negotiate anymore. We used to back in the day, but we do still negotiate our master agreement with our teachers as well as our support staff.
It's a great question though, because a lot of people are wondering, does this lead to a statewide teacher's contract? And I have not heard many people say that they think that's where it's going, and it's more likely that whatever systems if there are new districts that are established, it would be negotiated at that new district level.
Okay, because I mean, that has a huge impact if it's just Franklin County or if they're gonna put us in with Chittenden. That's a crazy difference.
Yeah.
Same amount.
So that request is the same amount as last year. Any more discussion around that? So I'll go ahead and make that motion then to fund the request from Northwest Access. We'll do that by roll. Michelle?
Aye.
Lisa?
Aye.
Miranda?
Aye.
Audrey?
Aye.
Sam?
Aye.
Mary's an aye. Great, thank
That's all I
you.
have.
Is that it for you, Lynn?
It is.
Okay, thank you so much. So I recognize the late hour. I'm sure everyone's getting kind of anxious to get home, but maybe we could have a highlight from each of the principal reports, and then we'll come to a close. Kevin?
Yeah, I would be happy to start. So, I actually was sitting in this room 2 years ago, and the question was, as I was in the principal search, was all these things are happening all at the same time. What are you gonna do? And I think my response was, I'll retire again. But I believe I followed up with, I want to build capacity, so that is really not falling on one's shoulders. And so I had to bring my mother-in-law down to Florida, just got back a few minutes ago, and raced up here. And I am pleased to say that I wasn't missed, and that there wasn't any fires. If there were, they were put out by the staff. We have built it's to be sustainable, and it's really important that happens. And so I'm really just proud of the staff that we have here and what they do for kids and what they do for each other. So that's it.
Thanks, Kevin. Gavin?
All right, well, I'm gonna have to abbreviate this. I had planned for an hour, but no, in all seriousness, the one thing I did want to add, it actually wasn't in the notes, but it happened this past week and was just fantastic, and I just cannot say enough positive things about the teachers who worked on this project was. We came together as a school on Monday and Tuesday, and we used the designated professional development time for us to assess our portrait of a learner indicators. The ones that we'd focused on for trimester 1 were goal setting and reflecting and learning. And we are going to continue to focus on those goals or those indicators for the rest of the school year. And the first day involved mixed groups of teachers from different curriculums, from different grades, sitting down and really sort of evaluating and assessing how the students have demonstrated mastery of these indicators, and also sharing ideas of other ways that they could have students in class demonstrate this mastery of these indicators. One of the things that I really wanted to emphasize, and I really feel that the teachers did a wonderful job of integrating, was that this wasn't supposed to be like an additional thing added to the plate. This was take what we're already doing and how can we take the strategies that are working and better align it, or just make sure that we're explicitly targeting these indicators and allowing students to demonstrate it as well. The second day is where it got really exciting, because in those same mixed groups, I offered some common domains. I borrowed from some of the work that Richford Elementary has been doing, and I had different groups focus on 2 new indicators, so each group got a different indicator, and so they sort of went through, unpacked it, looked at the portrait of a learner learning continuum as well, and also once again shared what does this indicator mean, and also how can students demonstrate mastery of it in class. And then we went into grade levels or grade bands, and from there, and then I assigned UA teachers and interventionists and special education teachers based primarily on the grades that they primarily work with. And as a team then, they identified 2 additional indicators, so there'll be a total of 4: goal setting, reflecting, and learning. And then the different grade bands chose 2 additional indicators that they would like to continue to, or to pay particular attention focusing on as well. Our K2 and middle school actually were fully aligned, which was kind of interesting. And it was community, being a part of a community, and then I am so sorry, let me pull it up. This cold has kind of knocked the memory out of my brain. And empathy. And then grades 3-5 chose community and expression clearly through writing and speaking. And so from there then we once again did a gallery walk, shared different strategies for how we can integrate these indicators into instruction. And it was just really exciting. It was really wonderful to bring the teachers together and see them building things together and reflecting and learning. And I definitely am excited to see how that's going to be integrated into their lessons as well.
It's awesome, Gavin.
Great. Thank you so much, Gavin. Sandy?
Something that I haven't added to my report recently, Montgomery and a couple of others of our schools are undergoing some professional development through COGX, which is the science of learning. And we have it all scheduled out throughout the year, but I just found it really interesting. The last couple of modules have dealt a lot with strategies of memory, and I find it amazing that it's things that we do that we don't realize we're doing. So there were all these different, I think there were 8 strategies for memory, and then 4 strategies of retrieval processes, and just knowing that and being able to incorporate it into instruction, I think it's pretty amazing. And we have our second meeting of the month, second Tuesday of the month, we meet as a COGX staff meeting and discuss, different things people are doing with it. But then in addition, we have the student portion that the middle school has started, so everyone's going to be reporting out next Tuesday on how it's working with the students learning about the science of learning and understanding themselves as learners. So it's been kind of an interesting journey so far.
That's great. Cool.
Nice. Thank you so much, Sandy. Terry Sue?
I just wanted to share, Monday at our staff meeting, we were discussing behavior data and what we're doing that's working and could be focused or changed a bit. And I wanted to share the comparative data from the year before I arrived. We had up through the end of November, we had 527 majors. This year, through the end of November, we only have 96. So being more proactive and looking at it as a skill that needs to be taught and replaced is, it's reduced each year, but having that mentality has really changed, I think, our structure, behavior, and our systems. So I share that success that we're seeing.
Great. Thank you so much. All right, so I guess just to kind of wrap, I know it's been a long meeting. Courtney will be reaching out to folks around the interview process, and people will check their calendars and see what they might be able to, kind of how they might be able to plug into that process for our principal search. Don't hesitate to reach out to me between now and next Tuesday if you have anything that you specifically want me to highlight in advance of the December 11th meeting in St. Albans, and everyone is welcome, of course, to attend, and Courtney is going to send out the details on that.
It is encouraged, I should have said that each board will open their meeting so that they're hoping that there are quorums for each of the boards. So it isn't just we hope Mary goes, we hope all the board members are able to go. We understand if some of you can't, but do hope that you do.
And then our next meeting, January 7th, we're meeting at the Enosburg Middle High. And just a reminder that January, February, and March, we meet in Enosburg, just so with the winter weather, it's a bit more central for everyone. less time on back roads and such. And then we may likely need to warn an emergency, or not an emergency, a special meeting, that's the verbiage, for if we aren't ready to warn our budget, we need to wait for those high school tuitions. So we'll stay tuned on that. Anything else from the board tonight before we adjourn? All right, I'll make a motion then to adjourn. Thank you so much for toughing it out here on our marathon meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Good virtual world. All right, thank you all so much. Drive safe.